facilitate as they come in.
Share. Can you see the slide?
We can.
Great.
Perfect.
All right, I'm going to let people in. Are we all set?
We are set.
Fantastic.
Hello, hello.
Good morning, everybody. Watching
Good morning.
filter in.
Hey.
Good morning. We'll just give some time here.
As folks are coming in, if they could please just read the slide and make sure you change your name accordingly so that we know who's in the room. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dave. It's nice to meet you. I'm Stephanie.
This is Norma, Stephanie.
Norma, great to see you. How are you?
Good, and you?
Good, really good. It's been a long time.
It has. It's very nice to see you.
Oh, you too. How's Michael doing?
He's great. I was actually just going to tell you, he told me this morning to please tell you hello from him.
Oh,
Thank you.
goodness.
You're doing well.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate the opportunity.
See how many, I cannot get my full screen there. Now I'm seeing everybody. Good morning, Becky. Good morning, Christine. Good morning, Beth. Welcome.
Stephanie, I'm just going to remind folks one more time, if folks could change their name so that we know who's in the room. So just first name, and then if you're a task force, a panelist, a community member, media, facilitator, would be super helpful for us.
Great. Good morning.
At
Kevin.
the risk of sounding really inept, how do you do that?
It's a great question and no worries at all. It's the three dots at the top of, if you hover over your Zoom, you select the three dots and just select rename.
Huh.
Hover over where your picture is, where you see your face.
Oh, yep. Okay, got it.
And there's three dots and the last name should be rename.
Yep. Excellent.
There we go, Norma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And do we have members of the media with us today? If we do, I'm going to introduce Jordan Steffen, who will raise her hand. She can help you get recording access from the Zoom call. So if you just want to raise your hand, go off speaker, or put it in the chat, she will get you connected. And I've got so many screens here. I'll just say hi, Kevin. It's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. Lynette. Lots of familiar faces. Hi, Dennis. Good to see you. Ashley, hi.
Yeah, my camera's not working, so I may need to log off and log back on.
Joey, hi. Good to see you. And Brandon, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
It's been a long time, my friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And Chelsea, Beth, Morgan, Kristen, Kelly, hello, hello. Janelle. We'll do introductions in a little bit. Great. We'll keep on going. And I will let Trace, you let me know when we've got a full house and we can go ahead and begin. My screen, I can't quite see everybody at one shot, so.
Yep, Jordan, if you want to take off the slide, and then I think we can see who's all here.
Ah, there we go, full house.
Amazing.
Good to see you.
All right, Stephanie, I think we are ready to roll.
All right. All right. Well, great. Wonderful. And good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's wonderful to see all of you. Lots of familiar faces, colleagues I have worked with over many, many years, and just a pleasure to spend time with you again. And welcome to all the new people. Very excited to work with all of you and get to know all of you better. Just to begin, for those who are not familiar, my name is Stephanie Villafuerte, and I serve as Colorado's Child Protection Ombudsman. I have served in this office going on almost 7 years now, since about 2016. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our agency and to this task force. I'm going to spend just a few moments to explain a little bit about the Ombudsman Office, as again, I know some are more familiar with our work than others, but just by way of background, our agency was established in law in 2010, and we are currently an independent state agency located in the Judicial Department. We have 10.5 employees, and our work really is about the following. This past year, for example, we received 1,000 phone calls from citizens. And the reason citizens call our office is really to try to get assistance navigating the child protection system. And broadly what that means is, if they run into problems in a case, a dependency and neglect case, for example, if they're struggling getting services for themselves or for their children, and they're reaching sort of these brick walls, if you will. Our agency is really designed to work with citizens, and one-on-one, we provide free confidential services to them. And we reach out to agencies on their behalf and help them get the care and the services that they need. A lot of our work is based on facilitation and mediation, because as an ombudsman, we are required to be independent and objective in every case that we handle. When I talk about the work, what some of the examples that come to mind are, for example, we will have parents who will call us and say, my child was removed from, my home by human services. What do I do next, right? Or parents who call and say, I'm trying to get in compliance with my treatment program. I'm struggling to reach somebody. Can you help me reach someone? We hear from youth who will call from the Division of Youth Services or even foster care placements and say, hey, I'm struggling with the conditions here. Can you help me resolve these? And so those are just a couple of examples of the sort of calls we receive. I'm always quick to let people know, though, that we receive calls regarding what we call the child protection system broadly, meaning we work with behavioral health system for youth, we work with human services, child welfare, we work with law enforcement, education, any public service that's being delivered to take care of children and families. So we have a pretty broad scope and jurisdiction. When I reference our individual calls from citizens, we get about 1,000 of those calls a year. But what brings all of us here today, right, is what I learned from those calls, what our staff learns. And so from those 1,000 calls every year, we sit down as a team and we really identify, what are the threads, the trends that we're hearing. And that really informs the second big piece of our work, which is the systemic work, the public policy work. And that's what brings us, again, here together today. You are all in an inaugural class, so to speak. It's a really great day today. We are officially launching this Public Policy Advancement Center, and it's a space where we can bring community members like all of you to help problem solve around critical issues that are impacting children and families in our state. Our goal in providing this space is to provide education, to provide independent and neutral facilitation, to bring the best minds and hearts to the table. That is our goal here, to solve critical issues facing our state's children. And so, as we bring you here today, that has been our role, is to facilitate and convene this really important conversation. Just some very quick background. Why? How did the Ombudsman get involved in this particular topic of youth who run away from placement? We really began our work back in 2017, where we began looking at residential childcare facilities. And at that time, it was the El Pueblo Boys and Girls Ranch. And they closed their doors in 2017. We did an investigation of that closure, if you will, and, really revealed a number of systemic issues in the functioning of that particular facility for kids, a lot of safety concerns that were raised. Flash forward to 2021, we once again were called by citizens who raised concerns about safety, namely children who run away from residential child care facilities. And in that particular instance, we were contacted by a citizen who alerted us to Timothy Montoya's death. And really that began our journey as an agency into this notion of youth who run away from placements. During those past, 5 or 6 years now, we've identified a number of concerns, which is why we wanted to have this task force, why we wanted to host this conversation. What we really learned is that, one, we do have youth, obviously, who run from foster care and residential child care facilities and group homes. In fact, as we sit here today, there are many youth who are on the run and have not been located. We also learned that youth run for a variety of reasons. A lot of the youth that run have behavioral health disorders and elopement behaviors and things that cause them to react to stimulus, to run, and in a sense put them in danger and harm's way. We also learned that kids oftentimes run to things. They run to their families that they miss when they've been taken from their homes or placed into the community in a 24/7 facility. We learned that they oftentimes want to run to community, friends that they know, or even staying in other locations. And so it's a really complicated topic. And we'll be researching why youth run. And I'll be introducing the researchers who will be assisting us with that particular task. We also learned what all of you know here is that when youth run, they are in danger. They face dangers on the street, including sex trafficking, violence, exposure to weather and other elements. And of course, they are unable to get their basic needs met, such as shelter, food, healthcare. We also know that the number of runaway reports far exceeds our law enforcement community's ability to not only find these children, seek them out, but also to return them. And that has been an ongoing crisis in our state for many, many years as well. We also learned that when we met with many of our colleagues in residential child care facilities, that they are lacking tools, they are lacking guidance, and how to prevent this runaway behavior. And that was something that we learned in our very deep conversations last year with those facilities. And finally, we learned, obviously, and sadly, tragically, that when youth run, they not only can get hurt, but they die. And that is what brings us to Timothy Montoya and to his mother, Elizabeth, here today. I want to note that we are very clear as an agency. We were very clear when we drafted this legislation that we have runaways across our state, right? Youth who are running from a variety of settings, not just from foster care or residential child care facilities. However, because of how our investigative work and our reporting has started, we will be focusing this task force specifically on youth and out-of-home placements. It is not to say that we, again, don't anticipate that the foundational work we do here as a group today will also be really useful as we talk about runaways in a variety of other contexts as well. But for purposes of our task force, we will be limiting it to that smaller subset, if you will. In terms of today's, well, I'm going to go to housekeeping first and then really just what we're going to see today. First, these sessions are being recorded. These are open meetings, and you will see a variety of members of the public, including our media and legislative friends, attending over the next couple years. The second piece is I really want to take a moment to speak about terminology. The term runaway is a difficult term. We want to be very careful not to label children and youth, right? I think the word runaway has such judgment that can be attached to it, right? And so you will see that throughout our materials, at least today, until we as a task force perhaps decide to use a different term, that we will always be referring to children and youth who run from an out-of-home placement, such as not to judge or label a particular individual. The other thing I will do in just a moment is introduce our staff and who will be supporting this task force. But in terms of today's agenda, I wanted to just lay the following foundation. Today, you are going to be hearing from people who will ground us in why we are here. You will hear from families and providers, if you will, who experience youth who run away from their facilities and their homes, and what that experience is to them. You will hear as well from youth who have also run from facilities and what that experience has been to them. And of course, I will be introducing you to Elizabeth Montoya, for whose son this task force is named, and her experience as it deals with as a parent who lost a child who ran away from a facility. We really believed that it was super important to ground ourselves in, again, why are we here, right? As all of us are involved in our community positions, we all serve the public every day. And we wanted to ensure that this task force really honors the work that's being done in community, and that we begin our conversation in community. We have 2 long years to work together, and we will be talking about all sorts of technical and legal and other wonky things as it relates to this subject matter. But today, I urge you, this is a time for all of us to listen and to feel, and just to be part of other people's experiences. So thank you for joining me today on that. I want to just do some quick introductions. First, I am surrounded today by a fantastic staff. We have our client service analyst team who take those 1,000 calls a year that I've referenced. We also have our deputy, we have our communications manager. And so if all of you would just raise your hand. This is our team, and these are the people who make all this magic happen. So thank you all for being here today. I also want to take a moment and introduce Jordan Steffen, our Deputy Ombudsman. Jordan, just raise your hand. Jordan will be the point of contact from our agency. And again, she is all knowledgeable about all things related to this group. And I also now would like to take a moment and introduce our Keystone Policy Center. We are really fortunate that this task force is developed by legislation and that it is funded as well by the legislative branch. And so we were able to really secure top-notch services and care as we walk through this process. And so I'd like to introduce Trace Faust and Christine Scanlon, if you could raise your hands. Tremendous. And I will turn it over in a moment for you to give us a fuller explanation of your work and your duties here. So given that, I will conclude my remarks at this time, but really, I just want to say again that we are grateful to be on this journey with you. And I'll let you take it from there, Trace.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Stephanie, and really appreciate seeing everybody on the call today. Some familiar faces and some new faces, but I'm Trace Faust. I work with Keystone Policy Center. Oh, Jordan, you can take me off the spotlight. Let's see everybody. I'm like, don't put me big. And I also would love to introduce Christine Scanlon, who is our CEO and president of Keystone Policy Center. Christine, I'm going to put you on the spot if you would like to give a quick before I kind of talk about our role, particularly with this task force, but would love for you to just give a brief overview of Keystone, and then I'll get into kind of how we're going to be here today.
Thank you, Trace. Glad to. And welcome. Good morning, everyone. We're honored to be with you this morning and to help in this very, very important work. I'm Christine Scanlon. As Trace mentioned, we are with the Keystone Policy Center. We're a nonprofit organization. And our mission is very succinctly said to help people reach a higher common ground. And that means working with the diversity of voices and perspectives in order to reach goals and ideas and innovative thinking that might not otherwise happen. So we are very appreciative of Stephanie and her team to be included in this effort and grateful for all of you attending today with us.
Thanks, Christine. So, we're really here to help create the container. I mean, everybody's worked with the facilitator, right? We're going to try and make it interesting and engaging, and not so that you don't just sit and listen to us, but really eager to honestly get to the intros. And that's what we're going to be spending a lot of time on this morning, because this is telling Stephanie and Jordan a really incredible opportunity that you have a 2-year task force. I was saying that I'm working on a different task force right now where we have 2 more months. And this is really going to allow us the time to go deep. And, it's unique too, because we have folks from all over the state. And so we have this opportunity virtually, but that also creates some challenges to really create connections and understand who's all here. So this introduction exercise is really for the task force members. So I'm going to go down the list, and if I miss anyone at the end that is on the task force, please speak up and let me know. And then I know we have a variety of other folks on the call. And so there will be an opportunity for you all as panelists to introduce yourselves when we get to that part. And if there are other folks that are here that would like to make sure that we know you're here, please drop that in the chat. But right now, I really want to highlight who's on the task force so folks are really clear about that group of folks. Anything, Stephanie or Christine, to add before we get to that? Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to go down this list. And I also want to name that if I mispronounce your name, please correct me, and I'll make a note of it. So I'm going to start. What I would love for you to do is introduce yourself. I know that there are 24 appointees. We're short a few spots, but please let us know who you are, your role on this task force as your appointee states, and then also just on a personal note, why you're excited to be part of this work. What brings you here today? This is a big ask to be on a task force, right? To not just come in one time, but would love to know your why. So I'm going to start with Lynette.
So I'm Lynette Overmeyer. I am on the Western Slope. I'm actually work for child welfare in Mesa County, so I'm the rural representative. I am excited to do this work because I've been running a runaway task intervention group over here for the last 1.5 years and trying to tackle the issue of youth that run away across our community from a variety of settings, including home. And so this is a passion of mine. And so I'm excited to get to this work and help find some solutions.
Thanks so much, Lynette, and love that Western Slope representation. So appreciate you being here. I'm going to move to Michelle. I'm not sure if I've seen Michelle. All right. We'll move on to Beth.
Oh, I'm here, sorry.
Oh, sorry. All right, Michelle, go ahead.
So Michelle Bradley, I am a supervisor with Douglas County Human Services, and I supervise the adolescent team. And so this is a huge population that my team and I work with. We have many kids who are currently on the run right now. And so my why is how we can better support and, eliminate this problem.
Appreciate that, Michelle. Michelle is a familiar name to me. I was a foster parent, and she was the manager for the caseworker that I worked with as well. So Michelle, nice to hear your voice again. Gonna move on to Beth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Montoya. I go by Beth. I am Timothy Montoya's mother, and I'm just honored to be a part of this process today. And I hope that as a result of my tragedy and others, that we can save more kids. Thanks.
Beth, thank you so much. I know we're going to be hearing a lot more from you here in a short time, so appreciate that. Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Cole. I'm with Denver Department of Human Services, and I'm representing the Colorado Human Services Directors Association. And I'm passionate about this. I am the institutional supervisor in Denver County and work with the facilities and different providers throughout the Denver metro area. And we have identified kids who run as a challenge for the providers and a concern for the safety of the kids. So hopeful to work towards ways to combat that for the safety of the kids.
Thanks so much, Anna. Beth McNally.
Good morning, I'm Beth McNally. I'm a program manager with Denver Public Safety Youth Programs. I oversee the Ronnie project, which stands for Runaway Outreach Notification and Intervention. So I have a team of caseworkers who do outreach for all the youth that are not system involved within Denver. I'm also the coordinator for the Juvenile Denver Anti-Trafficking Alliance multidisciplinary team. And prior to this role, I was in law enforcement for 13 years with Boulder PD, and I was a sole investigator for human trafficking as well as juvenile runaway cases. And so having kind of seen both sides, it's just, yeah, wanting to keep these kids safe is my passion.
Thank you, Beth. Honored to have you here. Chelsea.
Hi, I'm a foster parent in Larimer County, and I've been fostering teens for over 13 years. And I have had a bunch of kids who have ran away and just experienced some of the additional trauma and outcomes that could come with running away. And so I just want to figure out how we can better support these kids. And I feel like I have some insight after working with all these teens and families for 13 years.
Chelsea, I'd say with confidence, you certainly have some insight. You're like, I've been doing this for 13 years and you're holding a baby. So
I have 2 teens in my home currently, so we're still right in the middle of everything.
Amazing. Thanks, Chelsea, for being here. Appreciate that. Janelle.
Hello, my name is Janelle Goodrich, and I am here serving as the kinship part of this. And the reason that I said that I would do this is I actually work in anti-human trafficking movements. I run an NGO that gets appointed by law enforcement at local, state, and federal level. And so I only take the hard cases. Most of the time, my kids that I'm serving are on the run. And I'm meeting them out, trying to give them their needs met. I recognize a lot of the faces here just from work life. And I am a kinship provider from a runaway. And I actually was kinship to one of the children and adopted her. So just lots of different reasons why I'm in this, but excited to be part of it.
Thank you, Janelle, for being here. A familiar face, Becky.
Good morning. Good morning, Trace and everybody. Great to see you. I'm Becky Miller Updike. I'm the executive director of CAFCA. That's Colorado Association of Family and Children's Agencies. CAFCA has been around advocating for agencies for 40 years now, and we work to support the agencies that take care of kids in the continuum of care, all the way from our highest levels of care down to residential, down to foster care, and into community-based services. So our members represent a whole swath of care for these youth that we're talking about and focusing on today. My focus and my why is to help keep the kids safe. I know that all the CAFCA member agencies that I'm working for would say the same thing. We care deeply about their safety and sometimes find ourselves in really difficult situations. And so we're here to learn together and contribute what we can. And I appreciate everybody who's interested in being on this. It's important work. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Appreciate you being here. Brandon, I have you as Brandon or Bry, so you tell me. Maybe we're not at the Bry level yet. Are we there?
No. I'm Brandon Miller. I'm the executive director of Southern Peaks, which is a psychiatric residential treatment facility. And the reason that I'm involved is based on, trying to keep kids safe. And I see the challenges that, runaways have for organizations like ours and the safety issues they present for the kids and the destabilizing effect it has on kids when they're in crisis. So, I look forward to trying to solve that complex problem.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate you being here. Kevin.
Good morning. My name is Kevin. I'm a parent of a adopted son who's run away something like 40 to 50 times, not only from our home, but from each of the 13 facility stays that he's been at. He's either run away or attempted to run away. I think I have something to offer based on my experiences. I've heard a lot of assumptions that don't reflect my experiences at all about runaways. So I thought maybe I had something to offer.
Absolutely, Kevin. I know that's a certainty, so I appreciate it. And apologies again that Kevin let me know this morning that my email went to his junk folder. So Kevin, I'm glad we figured it out and you're here. Appreciate that. Going to move on to Norma.
Sorry, trying to locate the mute button. My name is Norma Aguilar Dave, and I'm the Executive Director of Savio House. As I am on the task force as a representative of providers who serve children who have run in the past. And so, gosh, as a provider of who had a residential program, we closed that program about 2.5 years ago. My hope is to just bring hopefully some insight about why children may run from placements. What are some of the things that we may have worked on while we had a residential program to decrease the number of children that were running from our program? And to just listen and with a clinical lens and see if I can offer any insight to helping providers and children stay and not run away and put themselves in danger.
Thanks, Norma. I appreciate you being here. Going to move on to Dave.
Hey, good morning, Trace. David Lee with Division Youth Services. I am the Western Region Director for DYS, based out here on the Western Slope. I asked to be the DYS representative just because, honestly, I just believe in doing what's best for youth. And so many of these kids have dealt with traumatic things that have happened in their life, and then it just seems to exacerbate when they're in these runaway situations and get traumatized over and over again. And I just want to find ways to help this group find services for these kids, for these providers, and find ways for these kids to not penetrate deeper into the system, because that's usually what happens. As they run away, they just get deeper and deeper into the system. And so that's kind of my passion. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Dave, for being here. Appreciate it. Appreciate that additional Western Slope representation. So thanks for laying that out. I'm going to go on to Chase. All right, Chase, I'm not seeing you. Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Cotter. I'm one of the sergeants with the Denver Police Department. It's my unit that responds primarily from an investigative point of view on children who have run from facilities like this. So I'm in this capacity. I get to see kind of the other side of how long they're gone and where they've been and what efforts law enforcement can do to help recover them. I'm excited to hear some of the information that other professionals that are here have that can help inform our response to try to get these kids back to safety in a sooner than later fashion. So
Appreciate it. You said Lieutenant, right? Lieutenant Cotter. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. All right. I'm wondering who I'm missing from the task force, because I know Chase Leonard, and I didn't you hear Ashley Chase, another Chase. So Ashley, go ahead.
I'm Ashley Chase. I'm a staff attorney and the legislative liaison with the Office of the Child's Representative. We're the agency that oversees attorneys who represent the children or their best interests. And my interest in this is really twofold, because prior to joining the office, I was a practicing GAL for 10 years. And so many sleepless nights with clients on the run or calls from clients to come get them in unsafe situations. And then as my position at the OCR, really passionate about policy and system improvement, and excited to tackle another issue.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ashley. I'm going to move on to Dennis.
Hi, I'm Dennis Desperas with the Colorado Department of Human Services. I'm the Provider Services Manager. So the unit I am with oversees licensing and monitoring of facilities that serve the children and youth. I'm excited to be here because I think this is a very diverse group of people that can really help create have some creative ideas on how to fix this situation with runaways. It's been a problem I've been in this field working here for about 30 years, and it's been a problem for 30 years.
Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate you naming that too. It's incredible to me the amount of perspectives we're hearing from so far. So appreciate everyone. I'm going to move on to Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Abbott. I'm the manager of the Office of Adult and Juvenile Justice Assistance at DCJ, and I'm here as the CDPS representative. And my reason why is I've worked in the juvenile justice system for over 25 years and just really want to give my part to help keep these kids safe and keep them where they need to be and to get the services that they need.
Thank you, Kelly. Honored to have you here. Renee.
Hi, I'm Renee Marquardt, and I'm representing the Colorado Department of Human Services. And our department certainly has a great interest in this topic. And also personally, my professional background is as a child psychiatrist, and this is the population I've spent my career focused on, working with youth and juvenile justice systems and foster care, and working myself in residential centers with these kids. So like as Dennis said, I think it's great to see all the different agencies and representation. It's a really tough problem to solve, and it's exciting to see everyone coming together and see if something can be done to actually improve things for the situation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Renee. And Dave Hayes. All right, so I'm missing Dave and Chase. Is that correct? All right. Anyone else on the task force that didn't have the opportunity to introduce themselves? Amazing. Okay, well, really appreciate folks laying out the why. Nice to just hear that from everyone and to understand again who's in the room. We're going to have continued lots of opportunity to connect with one another, get into small group discussions, and really go deep with folks. But again, today, as Stephanie said, we're really focused on that listening piece. And so in that spirit, I'm actually going to hand it back over to Stephanie to kind of lead us in the next direction. So thanks, Stephanie.
Great. So yes, I'm really honored to introduce our very first guest, Elizabeth Montoya. What I will tell you is I've had the honor of knowing Elizabeth now for almost 2 years. As I mentioned earlier in my comments, we first became aware of her son Timothy's case and ultimately of his death through a concerned citizen who wanted our agency to review his death to see what we could learn from it. And now, Elizabeth, I'm directing my comments to you. I want to thank you. You have been a partner and you have opened up your heart and your world to us, to my staff, as we endeavor to learn about Timothy, as we endeavor to try to make something good come from those circumstances. And I just want to thank you. It has not been an easy journey. For many of you, Elizabeth not only worked with our agency over 1.5 years and again, opened up, her heart, her mind. She provided us with information and records and stories about Timothy. And really, it was just an honor to be part of your life, unfortunately, due to these circumstances. But what I will also want to say is Elizabeth is a warrior. And I use that term very deliberately. She is like, we're doing something good from this. And she has been in the state legislature for the last 1.5 years. She has worked with legislators. She's been on stakeholder calls with us. She testified. She has told her story to the media because she wants us to do something good to learn. And so just thank you, Elizabeth, for honoring not just our team, but also everybody on this call. And with that, I will turn it over to you to share what you would like. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. I appreciate your time and your commitment to this process. I'll just share a little about Timmy. He had a tough life. We kind of struggled. We experienced homelessness when he was very small. And by the time he was 2, we were able to get into housing program and complete that here. I worked when he was very young. I was working 12-hour days, and his dad was a part of his life. He would pick him up early from daycare and do all the fun stuff, take him fishing and camping and, you know, that kind of thing. So Timmy was a happy and loving child, and he was always excited to meet new people. He was generous to a fault. And when he was little, you know, he would come home from daycare or school. He said, my friend this, my friend that. And I said, what's your friend's name? He said, I don't know. You know, he just loved to hang out with people that were kind to him. And almost all were. We started therapy at age 4 or 5 after Tim was molested by an older boy. And we were in play therapy for about 1.5 years. His therapist was really, really good. And she'd teach him things like, women are delicate flowers. You have to be kind. You have to be gentle to women. And he said one day, he said, my mom's not a delicate flower. She's a strong, strong weed. I said, okay, I'll take it. Tim played Little League Baseball in 3rd grade, which was a new and exciting experience for him. But by 4th grade, we began to have problems with him completing his homework and not turning it in, or just not turning it in even if it was complete. So they finally gave him an ultimatum during spring break, and he was able to knuckle down and complete the year without being held back. Over the summer of 2018, Tim had some new experiences. He would go out east with a family friend and play with some older boys for the weekend. They would go four-wheeling and shoot the BB gun and hike in the woods, you know, all boy stuff, but he grew up pretty quick that summer. Those boys' father was murdered, shot point blank in an attempted robbery that summer. And Timmy experienced his first real sense of loss. Also, there was a popular music artist, XXXTentacion, who was shot making an anti-Trump speech at the border, and Timmy was really affected by that. Of course, he'd been forbidden to listen to the music of that person, but you know, all the more reason for him to place him on a pedestal. So he also had met some older girls that went to the middle school down the street. And so he was talking with them quite a bit. Right before school started in 2018, he ran away. They stole his dad's debit card and ran away to Littleton. They took an Uber, and the older girl, who was 14 at the time, abandoned Timmy and the other little girl at a sports complex. It took hours to find them. We didn't locate them until 1 o'clock in the morning. Also during this time, Timmy had asked me what it means to be depressed. We had scheduled therapy at Aspen Point, but by the time we got to our first appointment, he had scratched up his arm with a little knife and disclosed that in his first therapy session. It wasn't shortly after that first run, he threatened to take a whole bottle of pills. He had a big knife in his hand and this open bottle of pills in the other hand. And he said to me, I'm going to do it if you don't call somebody. So we called 911, and he went to his first hospitalization here at Cedar Springs, where he spent 19 days. I asked him at the time, I said, Timmy, what would make you want to kill yourself? And he made reference to all the families who had been separated from their parents. You know, this is like during the border crisis that he had seen on TV. And I said, well, how would it help them to have you taken away from your family? You know, we would be so sad. And he just broke down crying. He's like, I don't know. So all of his empathy and compassion for other people, he tended to internalize their pain. And I think that's where it started. So So that first hospital stay was the start of a 2-year-long struggle to try to get him back to a healthy mental state. And he started expressing suicidal ideation. After his first release, he was out for about a week and a half before he went back inpatient. They were trying different meds. Nothing seemed to work. After the third hospitalization, they came to me and they said, we want to look at putting him in a residential treatment facility. Well, I didn't want to do that. It was the start of a school year. He had a lot of work to catch up. And I said, well, let's try one more time to take him home, get him some home services. But it just didn't work out. During that time that he came home, we experienced a domestic violence situation. And then we left and we went to Tessa, to the safe house, where he just couldn't stay stable. So he ended up going to a residential treatment facility in Denver. That facility was fully locked. It had big, high wrought iron gates all around the complex. And Timmy, you know, we all kind of thought by that time that his expression of suicidal ideation wasn't that he wanted to die, but he liked the attention of being inpatient. You know, that he was autistic, and I kind of liken it to a kid with autistic behaviors. You know, they settle on one certain thing and focus and repeat it over and over. So going to hospital was kind of Timmy's repetitive behavior. But we made a lot of progress during that time. We had family therapy. We sort of learned to bond again. And, but you know, almost every day they would put Timmy in some kind of a therapeutic management hold for whatever behavior. Well, Timmy's love language was personal touch. So it kind of made sense that he would continue to act out and have to get into these holds. And, you know, of course, they notified me right at the very end. The last 3 or 4 weeks, he had somehow managed to figure out a way to get beyond the fence. And they would call me and say, oh, Timmy's run away. He went out and laid in the road saying he was going to die. And I just assumed that these big sturdy girls that worked there were going out and managing him back onto the property. What I didn't know until much later was that once they're beyond the property lines, placement providers are not allowed to lay their hands on them. So Timmy came home. Oh, are you there still? Sorry, I lost you. And Timmy came home in July of 2019, and we had excellent in-home therapy services set up. We had been approved for a Medicaid waiver, which was supposed to offer services like massage therapy, music therapy, in-home support services. And while we waited for those services to engage, we had these therapists coming into the home, and he made a lot of progress. He went 79 days over the Christmas months without going back to hospital. And that was the longest time in 2 years that he spent at home. Right when our home therapy started to taper down in that January, and he started to spiral again. So part of the Medicaid waiver issue was that it was supposed to supply all these services, but there were no providers in Colorado Springs that would accept that waiver for payment. You know, Denver had providers, but nothing here in the Springs. And that started 2 or 3 months of searching for providers. We finally found someone who would help with the after school. He started ABS therapy, is that it? And he seemed to be doing well, but he just couldn't stay out of the hospital. 21 days was then the longest time he spent after the 79 without being hospitalized. So we decided that the only course of option was to look at other residential treatment facilities. We finally got one to give him a bed. This is all in the middle of COVID, you know, and it just came up suddenly. They called me on a Sunday and they said, okay, we have a bed for him on Wednesday. We admitted him to this facility. And at that time, he had been started on a different medication, which had just been increased. And I noticed that his affect was different. He was almost dissociated. He wasn't even wanting to eat. So I advised them that I thought this was a medication issue and was assured that, you know, they would keep an eye on him. Yes, during the last 3 weeks before he was admitted, he had begun running away from my house, from his treatment, from his school. And he was running down to like the Black Lives Matter protest. And he would always call me 3 or 4 hours later when he was done and say, come get me, here's where I am, you know? And so when he went to the treatment facility, that was his main negative behavior that he was presenting, was the eloping. Unfortunately, Timmy ran 5 times in 3 days. And on his last run, he ended up on the frontage road by I-70 in Wheat Ridge, where he was struck by a vehicle and sustained fatal injuries. He had just multiple fractures. His skull was fractured. He had been taken to a trauma center in St. Anthony's Trauma Center, and nobody knew who he was. So the agency had filed a runaway report with Denver PD, but that wasn't communicated to surrounding areas. So they have this adolescent who is severely injured, and they didn't know how to contact anybody. So I'm sorry, I'm not as prepared as I should be. So Timmy was missing for 26 hours from the time he ran from his placement to the time they alerted me. The hospital put something out on Facebook with his photo, and my friend in Washington recognized him, all beat up and tubed up, and contacted her husband on Denver PD, who then of course contacted me in Colorado Springs. And I can't tell you, that was the most agonizing 26 hours of my life. I knew something was wrong because he hadn't called. All the other times he would call, you know, he would find a phone. I knew something was wrong, but of course I didn't know what. I was able to come to the hospital. Timmy was in a coma, and I was able to spend the last 12 hours in his hospital room with him before he passed away. So there are so many things that we can address here. And over the next 2 years, I hope that we will find ways to keep our kids safe. I mean, so many kids out there running, and many more than Timmy have passed away or gotten themselves into horrible situations. So I think if we can figure out why they're running away, figure out how to share information to other counties so that they can be identified in the case of emergency. You know, so many things can be addressed here. And I'm just thankful to be a part of the process. Sorry. Okay, that's all I have, I guess.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you for joining us and really being on this journey for another 2 years with us. Again, I just appreciate you sharing with us because there's so much to learn from your experience, and just full of gratitude for you. Thank you. Trace, I am going to go ahead and turn over our first panel to you if you want to introduce those individuals.
Thanks, Stephanie and Beth. Thank you so much. Like, incredibly honored that you're here and that you're willing to share, and that your perspective on this is, where do we go from here and how do we ensure that something happens? So I just want to say thank you because that was incredibly powerful to hear. So thank you for sharing that, sharing your story with us and sharing about Timmy. I love that he's Timmy to family and friends. So thank you for sharing that. So again, this I want to kind of reground us again in this idea that this first meeting is all about listening. And, you know, it's a lot of listening, and we understand that it's a lot. We're asking a lot for everyone to sit and get, and sometimes that's our worst nightmare, right? But this is incredibly powerful and incredibly important to ensure that we have perspectives that are heard deeply. And I want to be really clear that I know we have a lot of perspectives on this call. And so, you know, we have county representation, we have state representation, we have family representation. We have, I mean, there's so many perspectives here. And so the perspectives that we're starting with today are by no means the only perspectives that we are listening to. And I just want to be clear about how we're going to move forward to that. So we're starting with two panels today. The first one is a provider panel, and the second one is a lived experience panel. And so I want to do, if you could, Jordan, if you could just go ahead and start highlighting folks. I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves, but and I want to go down the line first. So we've got Brandon, who is a task force member, and I believe you're the only task force member on this panel. Everyone else are community members that have agreed to come talk to us. And then we've also got Samantha as well. So I'm going to give a quick, you know, we're going to just have a conversation, and really I want you all to take this conversation where you'd like to go. I have a few probing questions to get a talking, but first would love to just introduce ourselves. And I know, Brandon, we've done an introduction, but I'm also still going to come back to you just to reintroduce kind of who you are and what you're representing. But would love to start, Erin, if you could just quickly introduce yourself and what you bring today, your perspective.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a social worker, but I worked at Devereaux from 2017 to 2018, and then Tennyson from 2018 to 2020. So I just want to, you know, be able to share my experience and my thoughts on this whole situation.
Thanks, Erin. Really appreciate you being here. Morgan.
Hi, I'm Morgan Richards. I live in Wheat Ridge, and my experience is that I'm an adoptive and foster mom, and the young man we fostered ran away from every placement he was in. He died the end of July, not related to running away, certainly related to his trauma. And then our son right now is in residential care at Third Way Lincoln, and ran away and would disappear, always seeking his bio family. And we had to use a DNN last month to keep him in care.
Thank you, Morgan, for being here. Sam.
Thanks, Trace. My name's Samantha Buck. I am the administrator over at Brad's House. We're a residential childcare facility with pending QRTP status in Monument, Colorado. We house 9 boys at a time who are placed with us for a myriad of reasons, which y'all can imagine. And prior to that, I worked at the Department of Human Services, both at Douglas County and El Paso County. So I'm really thankful to be a part of this. Thank you, Trace, for reaching out to me, and it's good to see you again.
Going to say, full disclosure, I know Samantha. She was the caseworker for a kiddo in my care for the last 2.5 years, and she left and was at Brad's house. So I appreciate you being here, Samantha, and bringing that new perspective with you. Go ahead, Brandon.
Hi, I'm Brandon Miller. I'm the executive director at Southern Peaks. I'm also a therapist, a practicing therapist at my facility. I carry a caseload as well. So, you know, I have a perspective from both angles as a direct provider and also as an administrator of the organization at Southern Peaks. And it's just, you know, the difficulties of seeing kids in crisis and not being able to do anything to, or do what is necessary to support them and to stop them from being unsafe, and what the impact that has is, you know, a challenge in an already challenging field. So, you know, that I hope I can bring that perspective. to, this panel.
Appreciate that, Brandon.
Mhm.
So the first thing is, like, I really want to get into, you all have these really specific experiences, and I think we all know, the why we're here, and we know that folks are deeply troubled by this issue of kids that are running away, and we know the task of this task force, right? And so, but really what we want to hear is your experiences as it relates to, like, I would love to hear stories specifically. I know I've heard it from a number of you, but we have limited time, but I want to give you an opportunity, when you think about your experience as it relates to youth that you have worked with, or youth that have been in your home, in your case, Morgan, that have run from out of home placement. Can you tell us a little bit more, just so that we can really understand your perspective in that specific experience? So Aaron, I'm going to start with you because I know you have a story, and you actually testified as well. And so would love for you to open us up if you could.
I'm just going to read what I wrote for the testimony. So if you've already heard it, I apologize.
Oh, please.
But so I worked at Devereaux from 2017 to 2018 and at Tennyson from 2018 to 2020. The year I worked at Devereaux was the most traumatic year of my life for several reasons, but the greatest reason being the death of Andrew Potter. Prior to August 31st, all three of the delayed egress doors on the unit that Andrew was on were broken, one being locked shut with a padlock. Multiple maintenance requests were made to get the door fixed, but as soon as we waited for that to happen, management's solution was for staff to be the doors. I was assaulted numerous times over the weeks it took to repair the doors, and multiple kids ran from the campus. Once the clients left the unit, the large holes from missing boards in the fencing around Devereaux made it easy for them to leave campus and enter the community. On August 31st, 2018, Andrew and two of his peers ran from Devereaux. This was the last time I saw or spoke to Andrew. Andrew was supposed to discharge home to his parents and two younger siblings the following week. He was so excited and had already packed all of his belongings to take home. The last thing Andrew said to me was, "Can you please make sure all of my stuff stays safe?" That evening, my shift ended around 11:30 p.m. Shortly after 11:30 p.m., I left Devereaux. I had to turn left on 100th and Wadsworth to get home from Devereaux, but on August 31st, I was unable to turn due to an accident that occurred. I can still see the red, blue, and white flashing lights from the police, EMS, and fire trucks, and I am haunted by the "I hope that's not a Devereaux kid" comment I made to my partner as we drove past the accident. I later learned we drove past the scene where Andrew died, only minutes after it happened. The next day, I received a call from one of the managers asking me to come in on my day off to help tell the other boys on the unit, his friends, that Andrew died. Seeing the client's immediate grief and distress is something I will never forget. Andrew's best friend looked at me with pain and tear-filled eyes and said, "You were supposed to keep him safe." And he was right. From May 2018 to my resignation in September, I made multiple attempts to discuss my concerns for the client's safety with my supervisor, the manager of the unit, the quality director, and the CEO. I received the same response every time: "There is nothing we can do." I will no longer take "there is nothing we can do" as an answer, because there is always something that can be done, which is why I'm speaking with you all today. A week after Andrew's death, I was told I was spreading negativity around campus because I continued to talk about his death and how it could have been prevented. After having time to reflect, I realized that I was not spreading negativity, but that I was speaking the truth that Devereaux wanted to hide. These facilities are encompassed by a culture of secrecy, denial, and burnout. By not holding ourselves, each other, these facilities, the counties, and licensing accountable, we are failing and traumatizing the youth and families that we vowed to help by entering this line of work. Thanks. You're muted.
Someone had to do it first. It was going to be me. Thank you, Aaron, for sharing. And Aaron, can you just clarify, where are you now? You said you're a social worker, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a social worker with the Public Defender's Office, but just a separate entity for this.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Erin. Thank you for sharing. Brandon, I'd love to come to you next as someone who is running a facility, right? And would love to hear really more about your experience of what this looks like with, Erin's highlighting the challenges that she felt, obviously, but would love to hear from your perspective. What does this experience look like for you with this as an issue?
Yeah, so Erin, I'm sorry that you dealt with that situation, and unfortunately that happens so many times in the world that we live in, not just in facilities, but in the youth services world in general. I think unfortunately it comes down to the complexity of the problem, and oftentimes the right people not getting involved and trying to solve those problems as a larger perspective. But at the end of the day, it comes, when you're constantly, from a provider standpoint, when you're constantly feeling like you're defeated by, whether it's regulatory, requirements, whether it's community requirements, whether it's employment requirements, your people, it's often very easy to fall into that perspective where there's nothing that can be done about these things. And I try not to subscribe to that as an individual, but these problems are challenging and very complex. I try to believe that, and I want to believe that people that get into this field, really truly want to help people. And that's where you start. You try to find that common ground of how do we help? Okay, how do we make it better? I often, when I bring in staff, and they're brand new and they have no experience in this, because there's no training to be able to deal with this situation or what they're about to do and what they go through, because so much of us are ingrained in regular everyday life, and it's just not the same. It's these kids present challenges that are unique to most of the people that are coming into the doors. And so oftentimes I see staff do exactly what Erin talked about, where they're trying to protect the kid, and then they put themselves in a position where they end up getting hurt, or they end up being impacted. And I don't believe that has to occur. I believe it's, behavioral health is a science, and I believe there is practice on how to approach this in a manner that is safe for everybody. And I do believe in what's called the parallel process, where if safety is in the utmost importance from leadership all the way down to the people we serve, that's how you protect everybody involved. And so many times we forget about the caretakers themselves and putting them in a position to be safe. And that's not just with like training and coaching and the services that we do. It's also about the rules. Like, what are they allowed to do? Or do we have rules in place that are in direct conflict with the most simplest thing, which is to protect and serve, the clients that we are there. And Erin's right. There's so many of those types of rules out there that just prevent individuals like Erin to be successful at their jobs. And that's my hope, is that we make some common sense, changes that will absolutely put caretakers in a position that they can be a little bit more easy to be successful, a little bit, better for everyone involved. Because when you're in a crisis, when kids are in a crisis, and I think this is truly underestimated until you've experienced that, the emotions, the feelings around that when you are dealing with it as a caretaker, is one of the most pressured and scary situations that you possibly could be in. And it makes people scared, and it affects, you know, it affects you in so many different ways. That's where that vicarious trauma really plays a part in the burnout. And so it's tough, and I feel for the staff, and that's, you know, and you just try to do the best you can right now in the situations that you present itself. I don't know if anybody has a question for me specifically, but that's kind of, you know, my perspective.
Yeah, Brandon, I appreciate that. We're going to have time at the end for folks to jump in with questions for you all. But I really appreciate you sharing that, you know, that perspective. And I also, you're getting on one of my last questions that we'll get to around waving the magic wand, right? Like, what would we like to see? So I'm putting a pen in your comment around common sense, because would love to tease out more from you. Is like, from your perspective and your experience, what are those common sense, right? Because we might have different opinions on what those common sense solutions are from your perspective. So I really appreciate that and want to come back to that in a bit. Samantha and Morgan. Samantha, you know, you have worked individually as a caseworker with, you know, with youth that have run, and then now you're in this, you know, residential facility as well. And I know that y'all are a small facility. I think you said 9, but would love to hear so far. So it might be, honestly speaking, from past experience in working with those one-on-one cases. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with youth, you know, whether that's the challenges that you've seen firsthand that led to, you know, led to them running away, but then also some of the challenges that you're already seeing moving into a residential facility?
Yeah, thank you. I do think that moving to Brad's house has helped me put running into perspective, right? We need to look at why kids run in this sense. Are they running to something, or are they running away from something? And what, as we provide, what can we as providers do in order to prevent that? And so I think looking a little bit more preventatively, like, what was the trigger? What was the starting point? Was this something that was planned? And if it was a triggering event, then what can we do in order to prevent that? And that seems like Brandon was talking about, like, such common sense, but it's also taking the time to understand a youth and understand a kid in order to prevent that and develop those relationships in order to work preventatively so that we don't even get to a level 10. Like, we might get to a level 5 or a level 6, but what can we do to bring that down? So it's all very relational. And I think that does start, this touches on what Aaron was saying, positive relationships between, you know, milieu staff as well as management. And we need to have those, be able to have those open conversations so that staff are empowered to develop those relationships for youth. And I think going back to the, you know, when working at the department, I think that was a really big frustration too, in that we see kids running to community, their community members, people who they feel safe and trusting with. And what can we do as, you know, what can the department help do to, you know, provide services, provide for providers to enhance that sense of community so that the reward of staying is greater than that of, you know, running to a previous sense of community that they were feeling. So it's just a lot of thoughts, and it sounds like we're going to be getting into that all a little bit more later. But yeah, I think it's all very relational. What do we need to do to have positive relationships with our department representatives, for staff to have positive relationships with management, and then staff and management to have positive relationships with kids, because we need to have that felt safety. We need to have that trust in order for kids to want to stay. And I think that is really on us as adults.
Thanks, Samantha. I really appreciate you bringing in that perspective. And can you all hear me okay? Okay, perfect. I think you were cutting out, or somebody was cutting out, so I wanted to make sure. Samantha, super appreciate that. And kind of what I'm hearing from you drawing out is that when we talk about relationships, like, how do you actually bring that at a systems level, right? Versus just someone's unique ability to build a relationship with a kid. What does that look like to actually have that as part of the system and ensure that there's consistency regardless of where the kid goes? So I'm appreciating kind of your call on the system side of that. Morgan, I'm going to turn to you. I know, Morgan, you shared a little bit, and you've shared with me, obviously. I know that this is a sensitive time for you. You recently lost a kiddo, very incredibly important to you, that I'm sure you see his story and a lot of the stories that are already shared. And just
Yes.
appreciate appreciate the opportunity for you to share, but would love to, for you to share what you're comfortable sharing as far as your experience as it relates to his running away, and really where you saw the impacts and shortcomings there for him.
Both of these boys that I referenced have been let down, like we all have, by the system, because the system is built to think about the youth, the mass, and really they're each so unique that each kid needs something different. And, as a parent, it's just mind-boggling that, first of all, lack of training. When we became certified foster parents, we were required to have 27 hours of training plus our 5 hours of first aid. And it's mostly sitting in a room with a PowerPoint. You have to practice helping a dysregulated kid to become regulated. Foster and adoptive families ought to have some more requirement of therapy, right? Both of our boys were always seeking community, especially, trying to get close to birth family. And we are an adoptive family that makes room for your bio family, right? We do not get in the way of that. But what we aren't, I'm not a case manager. I'm not a therapist. We needed more support to help both of them feel like they belonged. Just last night at family therapy, our son, who after losing our one boy, you can imagine how our level of concern with his mental health. He said last night, I don't belong here. And when we left, my husband said, I don't think he feels like he belongs anywhere, because he also in that conversation said he never felt like he belonged in our family. He does not have connected, healthy relationships with his bio family. We're trying to work on that. But we've had to go to extreme measures to put him someplace where we can do that kind of work with a facility that views that as the therapeutic process. And we had to fight hard to get that. I just feel like we're all set up for failure, including our kids. So we lose them. There's also the lack of coordination about records. We found out last night that, the medical director now thinks our son in residential care may have CEC, which is, advanced head injury. He's got records in 3 counties. Nobody's really sure when he had a head injury. I can't get his Medicaid records. When he ran away in December, we live in Wheat Ridge, he ran to Denver. Once we knew where he was, they're like, we won't be able to bring him home because we lived in another city. So, after I was asked to be here today, I went to bed last night thinking, well, what is it? I wish I knew what to tell you what to do. It's really overwhelming.
Appreciate that, Morgan, and thank you for naming a couple of those specific instances of just challenges. I'm hearing you live in Wheat Ridge and your son ran away to Denver, and so you hit a barrier there at a systems level. So just appreciate you naming those specific challenges and examples from your perspective. Brandon, I see your virtual hand raised, so I'd love to bring you back into the conversation.
Yeah, just a quick 2 things to add to after I heard some of the perspectives there. I just want to add to that a little bit. Trace, when you talked about systems first, I think that is a big issue, because I think there is a real challenge to create some of these things or intentions in systems that, help at the end of the day for organizations and providers. I think oftentimes we get too assumptive in our beliefs of what is supposed to happen for people like, you know, when I first became a director, one of the challenges that I recognized early on was the farther I'm away from the ground floor, the worse my decisions became. And so that's where I made a choice to, you know, try to continuously be a practitioner involved at the ground level, because, you know, I assumed I knew what was going on based on my experiences and, you know, information, circumstantial information. But the reality of it is that we need to be on the floor and understand what is really happening. And I see that all across the system, is where we have assumptive, you know, this is what's going on based on our experiences, our credentials, and things like that. And then we actually make unintended consequences through trying to make good intentioned solutions. So that's, you know, one perspective that I see. And then based on like what Morgan was saying as well, you know, I think oftentimes our solutions is quantity. And one of the things I tell my staff all the time is that don't get so busy doing your job that you forget to do your job. And because our solution oftentimes is, you know, just more of it, more training, more of this, instead of looking at, you know, the realities. What's the quality? Who's the doing the training? Because the reality is, if we just continue to rely on quantity, more of, whether it's documentation, whether it's, you know, training or these things, you end up getting in a position where you're not doing what you are actually supposed to be doing, which is, you know, engaging with those kids, you know, spending time and serving those kids. And, you know, so you often see these gaps in performance, and instead of addressing the performance, and I'm not necessarily saying that, you know, you punish people or any of that stuff. It's about coaching and developing people to be better at what they do. We just add things to it, add another process, add another, you know, training, add this, add that. And then you're spending, you know, 80% of your time doing that kind of stuff rather than doing what your primary focus is, which is, you know, helping and serving kids. And I see that so many times in that trap happen, you know, a lot in this system.
Appreciate that, Brandon. I'm looking at our time, and I want to give some opportunity for folks on the task force to ask questions. So I want to do a quick whip around. I think I could make my own assessment of what I hear you saying as your top challenges from your unique perspectives. But I'd love if you could give voice, if you had to say, and I know the list, it sounds like you were hinting that the list is endless in some ways. But if you had to bring out two top challenges that, as this task force looks at the work ahead, to just consider from your perspective, being in that provider role and the variety of roles that you are, what would those two things be that you'd want to bring out to their attention to just be really crystal clear about? I know it's a hard ask, but I'd love for you to identify really two things. So I'm going to start. Let's see. I'm going to come back to Aaron, see if you're.
I would say it's, you know, training staff on how to engage with the youth in a way that is positive and productive and does, you know, make it so that the kids want to be at the facility and feel like they are included and feel like, you know, they're accepted and they're actually getting their needs met. I also think that it comes down a lot of like the politics within the company, people higher up who, you know, they do have their credentials, they've been doing it for a long time, but just the communication between the people who are higher up and the floor staff, I would also say is a big just disconnect, which impacts the clients.
Appreciate that, Aaron. So I'm hearing that disconnect kind of on the internal side, and then that other piece around like this sense of belonging. It sounds like that's where I'm hearing you. Brandon, I'm actually going to come to you next because you kind of already touched on that around like it's important to you to close that gap as an executive director, but you know that doesn't necessarily have to be in your top two if you have to choose a top two. So I'd love to hear what your top two challenges are.
I think, you know, the first challenge, you know, from an executive director's standpoint would be that, you know, getting people to understand the realities of the situation, you know, caretakers are I think it's hard to understand that reality when you're dealing with an at-risk population, and you know, that empathy for, the caretakers. It's a difficult world they live in. And then I would say, finding, I guess, workforce to, specifically deal with the complexities of what we do is probably the second thing that I would say is, the biggest challenge that I see, other than, the typicals of, just setting your organization up, your caretakers up to be successful. But I would say, those are the two biggest that I think.
So really that second piece is around the staffing piece.
Yeah.
Like looking at that holistically around, I just want to make sure I'm understanding, like, is it the quality of staff that you're able to attract because of challenges in funding piece? Is it consistency of staff because you're getting, can you just give a little bit more voice to like what that challenge specifically really looks like for you?
No, I think, quality really comes down to, people being in it for the right reasons. I believe if they are in the right reasons, we can, raise the quality. I think the uniqueness of, like I said, understand the realities of the at-risk world and the complexities that are involved in these situations. And I think somebody said it where, every situation is so individualized, and to be able to tap into the actual needs to serving particular kids and situations and caretakers, for training, purposes, and it's such a challenge. And it's so exhausting and time consuming. And, just a quick, unique thing to like Southern Peaks, as we transition to our psychiatric residential treatment facility, one of the areas that, we explored because of the population that we were bringing on of kids, was ABA and, services for kids and applied behavioral analysis. And it took me 6 months just to find somebody to be able to provide those services. And I'm a mental health counselor, and it was unique to me. So then I had to go and learn all about ABA and try to understand what's going on. And, and trying to find those resources to be able to help that, it's exhaustive, and then there's just limited amounts. So it's just little things like that. And as they build up, it makes the job overwhelming for every, level that is out there. And so it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge because of the uniqueness of each situation.
Yeah. And I appreciate you getting specific there. I think, what I'm really hoping is that task force members, as they move on in the different, sessions over these next 2 years, that we have these really specific examples of the challenges that folks are facing. So I just appreciate you naming that. All right, I'm moving on to Samantha, top two.
I don't think anyone's going to like this, but funding, in the sense that we see youth and kids do better with consistency. And I don't think that just means longevity of staff being employed at a facility or an agency, right? But for example, a lot of the kids that we work with, they do have adjusted daily rates so that we can provide one-on-one funding. So we tell staff it is your job for, 35 hours a week or however many hours are approved to get to know this kid, to know his triggers, to understand what helps calm him down. And like, you will be that person. And then we can tailor our treatment plan and our daily operations for that kid based on the information that we receive. So I think funding goes to that in the sense that we need to be able to provide those things. And if we want good quality care, then we need to be able to provide them well. So that's a personal perspective that I've seen. We do have kids who do better with the one-on-one mentoring. They know they have a person. They're not feeling like they're getting a million different answers from a million different staff and then something different from their caseworker. They have that consistency day to day that we can also build off of and build our approach off of. So that would be one. And then two, I think moving to this side, seeing more and more how caregiving systems are really put into a box. You know, when we're talking about, you know, specific trainings that need certain qualifications that are needed by staff, by administration, by management levels, when in reality, I think we have a lot of community members who are able to provide just as quality of care without necessarily the titles. We do see a lot of success from mentoring and life skills coaching, and just because it's not therapeutic doesn't mean it's not beneficial. And so really trying to connect our kids with people who have similar past experiences as them, but maybe without the need for the title, because we can't always find both, right? So I think being able to broaden how we provide services to kids and what we consider evidence-based and what we consider beneficial on a relational level, and then funding. That was a long walk to a short drink of water, but there we go.
No, I appreciate that. And thank you for the specifics. I mean, the part that I think actually goes well to Morgan's previous point is you're talking about that one-on-one, that personal piece. Morgan, I heard from you a comment around each kid is different. And so what does it look like to actually build an individual plan when we have these individual unique challenges for each kid? So appreciate that, Samantha. Morgan, going to give you an opportunity, your top two, and then want to open it up to folks for questions.
I think that the system has got to expand to really root the kiddos' supports, whether it's foster family, adoptive family, in that. With our son at his previous residential placement, we couldn't get the treatment plan until he was moving over to Third Way Lincoln for months. That's not okay, because we are part of his treatment. And I think there just needs to be more integration, which means you need more money. So, and also helping kids understand that their bio family may not always be those supports, right? And that takes a lot of work, which is money. You know, I hate choosing just two. I think it's the gaps in service. When our son, who's in residential, attempted suicide before his adoption, we got our best, most amazing level of support. We get the most support when our kid is already down that crisis spiral, and not when we're saying it's coming, it's building up. And that's true with police, mental health, like every system. It has to be really bad before we can get what we need, and it's usually too late.
Appreciate that, Morgan. I'm going to pause from any additional commentary here, and would love to, really would love for task force members to jump in. This is an opportunity to ask questions, to get really real with the folks that are given their time today. So would love for someone to come off and ask a question.
I have a question.
Yeah, Kevin.
If you see a child running or walking away from a facility, what's a facility able to do about it other than just talking to the child?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. Brandon, would love to bring you in for that.
Well, you know, right now, providers in Colorado, the state does not consider, you know, the AWOL or the walkout as an emergency behavior. If there is opportunity during that walkout or AWOL to, you know, talk, you know, them down. I mean, obviously try to do that, but there's limitations once you're outside the facility for, you know, barriers of, you know, like private property, you know, areas that, you know, aren't accessible to the caretaker to continue oftentimes. But if in that time there's a presenting, you know, imminent danger during that time, there is the potential that you can escort that kid back, but there has to be a secondary presenting, you know, emergency at that point. One of the difficulties and challenges, that I see with the caretakers is we often know what this kid's trying to do. And that AWOL or walkout is, really the first step of that escalation to the dangerous behavior that while they're in crisis. And, that level of imminency is not there because they're trying to get away from you first to commit whatever act they're about to try to do, because they're not thinking rationally or at that moment. And so it's a challenging, very interpretive experience that caretakers are put in with multiple levels of variables that aren't controlled in the facility, within the facility. So, whether it's streets, cars, neighbors, citizens, terrain, so it's an extremely challenging, but at this moment, if they're just walking and we're able to keep up with that kid, all you really can do is, the limits you have is try to talk them down, which is an extremely challenging experience. And it's probably one of the single biggest frustrations I hear from, caretakers and direct service staff, as it happens. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's what it is.
Well, Lisa, a follow-up question, which is, why isn't that an extreme emergency? I mean, if my kid's walking away from the facility, I consider that an emergency. And you've described an emergency of how far the things can happen. So why isn't that an emergency?
That's what I'm hoping to change. I mean, I agree with you, fundamentally. I don't know why.
Appreciate that question, Kevin, and Brandon, appreciate you weighing in. We've got some questions queued up. Samantha, if you got something quick, I just want to make sure we're giving opportunity for questions, but anything to add? Are you good? Okay. All right. Ashley, want to come to you next. See your hand raised.
Thanks. I was curious just hearing some of the panel talk about, looking at common triggering events or how youth are often running to something or away from something. And given what Brandon was just speaking about, has any facility tried to actually get data? Is there like it wouldn't be an exit interview. It'd be like, I exited and I came back, but like an interview about some of the events that led to it, just to see from a data perspective, what those common, if there are common triggering events, if there are, some commonalities here, because I know like anecdotally, I could think of a bunch of reasons why my kids ran as clients, but I don't know if anyone's undertaken any kind of official like interviewing data collection for that.
So we have started at Brad's house over the past year, tracking data trends through FormStack. And our hope is to be able to like really start isolating reasons for running or just any sort of behavior in general, not limited to running, but also talking about like property destruction, aggression, things like that, but down to what events happen that day. Does Billy have harder days, and does he want to run on days that he sees family, on days that he has therapy, on days that he had a test at school, on days that we have certain staff combinations? Have it depend on like what our advocacy and mentoring hours look like. So we're still very much in like the beginning phases of that, but we are starting to track again, like the reasons why maybe a kid is running away, or if they're trying to, find family depending, or peers or other community depending on what's going on.
Brandon, did I see you, or Morgan, do you want to jump in on that?
I just want to point out that I am somebody in my work, like I'm all about data. And we even would track triggering events to try to figure out, particularly with our son who's in residential treatment. And you know what? There are too many unknowns. There's too many mysteries that I think The problem with that mindset is the system demands the data to understand, and it comes down to this. Each kid is different. It could be the light on a particular day of the year, and there could be no other trigger. And that's where the investment in thinking about each child and their individual treatment plan is how it needs to think and work. That's just, my opinion. And I am somebody who kept looking for the patterns. And even with this, the way the last year has been, there wasn't. There's still so many mysteries.
Thanks, Morgan. Janelle, I'd love for you to come off.
Hi. So a lot of the stuff kind of got answered when everybody was talking. Morgan and Aaron, some of your guys' words were really big to me. One, as having kinship within my home. And then Brandon, your words, and Sam, because I do work in high risk adolescent youth, and most of my girls are on the run all the time. And when I see them run, it's very frustrating because you guys cannot do what you need to do to keep them safe. And then things like what Aaron experienced happen, right? And then the people at the facility are the ones that get blamed when the community that's calling the task force angry and complaining, which is why we're here, don't understand that there's so many laws in place that prevent you guys from doing the job that they think you should be doing, and then you get blamed. And then you go down to all of these problems of staffing. Who wants to walk into an environment like that? And so for me, I'm on here going, is all of this really to try to change and go to legislation? I agree with Brandon there. You guys should be able to do more. We went from one extreme of kids having no voice to kids having all of the voice. And in my experience, these kids know they can walk out and you can't do anything. And they are going to do that. And then they get put in therapeutic foster homes. I had an experience with a therapeutic foster home. Her training was junk. It was junk. And she was not prepared for the girl put in her home, and it wasn't her fault, but she was blamed. And that's really hard. So for me, I love we can't put things in a box that Aaron said, because everything is different. And so my question is for the task force that I am on now is the main point of this in the end to really take all of this data and talk about changing these things so facilities can be better, so therapeutic foster homes and kinship homes and foster homes can be better. And it should be different for kinship homes. We didn't sign up like foster parents did to do this. We got it overnight and had hours to say yes for a completely life-changing experience, and they leave you to the wolves. So my question for everyone in the DHS world over here is, what are we doing about it?
I want to appreciate that, Janelle. I'm sensitive to the time. This is clearly like what I'm loving about this is our first meeting, and what we're learning is like we got a lot of folks with a lot of questions and a lot of experiences that we need to be listening to. So I'm putting a pin in that as well. Stephanie, I just wanted to give you a chance. I see your chat around the data collection piece. Can you come off mute real quick and just give a quick voice to that? And then I want to take one more question.
Yes, I just wanted to, sorry, I think everybody can see or hear me. Yeah, I just wanted to address a couple of the comments in the chat. The first one was Becky had written to say that we should be exploring the reasons why youth are running, right? Running or running to or running from. And so the first thing I just wanted to add, and we will meet our research analyst in a little bit, we have contracted with the Colorado Evaluation and Action Lab, who are located at the University of Denver, to be conducting focus groups with youth in facilities, youth who have run away, staff members, with the goal of providing this task force with that information. So, to really enlighten the decisions that this group makes. So just wanted to address Becky and Ashley that in fact will be provided to this group. The second thing I just wanted to say is that another one of our charges in the statute is to review what data is available in the state. I have personally found different data sets from different organizations, none of which is terribly comprehensive, but then as a group to come together and analyze that data and what is missing, and to make recommendations as to perhaps data that must or should be kept in the future. So wanted to address the data point as well as the focus groups. Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks, Stephanie. I really appreciate that. I'm going to make an unpopular decision. Beth, Dennis, and Renee, I see your hands raised, and we've got to move on to this next panel because we have lived experience folks here, and I really want to honor their time, and I'm super eager to hear from them, and I think it'll be time extremely well spent. So to Brandon, to Aaron, to Samantha, and to Morgan, thank you so much. I think the point that I'll make is that we hope that we can continue the conversation with you all. And clearly with the queue of questions I have from folks, there are a lot of questions remaining. And so we will find continued opportunities to continue this part of the conversation from your perspective. So thank you for being here. A quick round of applause for our panelists. And thank you. All right, Jordan. I'm going to, so I'll say this. Why don't we take a quick 30 seconds where people can take themselves off video for a second. I can't believe I've kept you on for an hour and 45 with no stretch, but let's take 1 minute and we're going to come back and we're going to dive right into this lived experience panel. 3 incredible humans that I am really excited to talk with. But I know some people might need to stand for a second. So we'll do 1 minute and then we'll come back. All right, let's bring everybody back. Give us about a few seconds. Would love to see folks on. Would love if people are able to come on to video for this. I think this is going to be a really incredible discussion, and would love. I want to listen first and foremost. I know people are eager to ask questions. I'm eager for you all to ask those questions. But I want to make sure that we really give an opportunity to these 3 individuals to just chat, and then for you all to jump in and have dialogue with them. So Jordan, if you can go ahead and highlight Dominique, Tamisha, and Nate. Hey, Nate, good to see you. Pleasure to have you here. Every time I see Nate on video, I'm like, where do you live? It's always so cozy. I love it. And you're up in Georgetown, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yep. Cool. Love it. And then we should have Tamisha and Dominique as well.
If Tamisha and Dominique could turn their videos on, I can get the spotlight going.
Gotcha. All right. So Dominique and Tamisha, if you're able to come on video, that's what it's going to take to bring you onto the big screen. There's Dominique. It's saying that Tamisha doesn't have permission to unmute. So if you could
try that now.
Yep. And Dominique is on video, I see. So let's bring her up as well. The challenges of Zoom. I love it. Hey, Dominique. So good to see you. Dominique and I have just been chatting on the phone, so get to see your face. But I have to tell everybody in a little bit how I actually found you, which was on the incredible platform of TikTok. So we'll get into that story later, but that's a good one. Dominique went viral on TikTok, and I said, oh my gosh, I have to talk to Dominique. And then once I started talking to Dominique, everybody was like, you didn't know Dominique? And I was like, no, I didn't know Dominique. So really honored to have you here, Dominique. And then Tamisha, let's see. She's having video and unmute access issues. Jordan, if you can.
I have given access. I really hate to ask, would it be possible, Tamisha, to sign off and sign back on and see if we can?
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you.
Right, so she's gonna jump off and jump back on. Let's go ahead while we're figuring that out with Tamisha. I would love to just go ahead and jump into intros. And I thought long and hard about this, and I really want you to introduce yourself because I read both of your bios. I've talked to you extensively, but just two incredible folks here, and Tamisha as well when she gets a chance to jump on. But Nate, real quickly, would love for you to just tell us who you are and your interaction with the system. I know there's obviously more to dive into, but just real quick on that.
Yeah, so I grew up in Denver. I'm 29 now, and I've spent probably 22 years of that 29 years in the system. I grew up in foster care. I've been in a lot of residential treatment facilities, treatment places. And my parents were also terminated, and I eventually basically aged out of the system. And then I had kids of my own, and I had a DNA case, and I got my kids back. And now I currently am a parent advocate for ORPC, working with parents to help them get their kids back.
Appreciate it, Nate. Thanks so much for that quick intro. Dominique, give you an opportunity.
Hi guys, so my name is Dominique. I prefer to go by Domo. I spent 5 years in the system, so I went into the system at an earlier age, from the time I was 16, and I emancipated when I was 21. And then I took all of my pain and anger that I had towards the system and what I went through, and I created a nonprofit organization that's designed to help children in foster care succeed.
Thanks, Domo. I appreciate it. You said Domo like D-O-M-O?
Uh-huh.
All right, Domo, I appreciate it. Tamisha.
Hello, I have my headset on. Can you hear me? Awesome. Yeah, my name is Tamisha Macklin, and I spent 12 years in the Colorado State Child Welfare System. I ended up in the juvenile justice system, starting at age 6 until I went into DYS and transitioned out of actually third way when I was 19 years old. And I just wanted to say it's an honor to be here. All of you had said some really amazing things about how to help our youth. And I also just wanted to just say my deepest condolences to you, Beth. And it's amazing just that you guys are doing work around this issue.
Thanks, Tamisha. I really appreciate that. I know that gratitude is going to be shared both ways by everyone on this call. All right. Well, I want to do the least amount of talking possible. So I'm going to start with a question, and then would love for y'all to jump in. But Dominique, I'm going to start with you. So I was telling folks, and I'll say this again, found Dominique on TikTok talking around child advocacy. I think your tag on there is, can you tell me what it is? I think it's your favorite child advocate. Your favorite
best youth advocate.
Youth advocate. Okay.
The best youth advocate.
The best youth advocate. Got it. So, and you talked to me a lot about, in order to support youth and for youth to feel supported, oftentimes and almost exclusively, it's that support coming from folks that have had similar lived experiences, right? And so, want to spend time hearing more about your story and your experience so we can really understand some of that piece. And one of the focuses on this task force is the root causes. Right, as it relates to running away behaviors, but then also would love to get to that aspirational side with you all as well. You're in this space because you've experienced this, and you also want to make changes. And so we want to hear about specifically those changes that you would love to see based on that lived experience you have. So, but first, Domo, I want to talk more about, tell us more about your story. You came into the system at 16. You told me a really powerful story around around that idea of belonging or lack of belonging. What did that look like you coming into the system at 16, and what was that experience?
So like I said, I was a little bit older when I went into the system, and I went into the system for at that time what I thought was just the whooping, when I got in trouble, my parents disciplined with, well, not my parents, my dad disciplined with whooping, so that's why I went into the foster care system. The belt caught me in the eye, and it caught CPS's attention. So, from that point, I went from that point, it was just like traumatic. Like, I just want to express this to you guys enough. The removal of the child itself is a traumatic event for the child. And I don't think that professionals really understand that moment. Everybody thinks that we're doing something good by removing this child. And of course we're saving this child. But at the same time, we're also causing another PTSD moment for them. So I just want to express that, because like, to me, my advocacy is, I feel like CPS is legal human trafficking. There is no difference from removing me from my home and taking me and placing me with the strangers so you can get a check, they get a check, everybody gets a check but me. I don't care what nobody says, it's legal human trafficking. The definition of human trafficking is the force of removal and placing someone into a situation. It's not always about sex, And then, I don't know, like, I was placed with this, sorry guys, I'm really nervous. So if I'm talking too fast, ask me to slow down, please.
Don't be sorry.
So my first foster home, everything was cool. As soon as the caseworker left, it was like a total different like story. Like, locks went on the fridge. She would make us eat out of the same plate, the same bowl, the same fork. Like, I was an inmate. I had a little Ziploc bag where I kept all of my utensils. And when I was done eating with those, I had to rinse them off and put them back into the bag to be used the next time. And she would do stuff like, on the back of the chips, if it said 13 pieces per serving, she literally counted out 13 pieces of chips for us. Or like, think about like a little 12-ounce bottles. On the back of that, the serving size suggestion is 2.5 people. She would split that between 3 of us. And that was like our meal, right? We should be grateful that we were eating, or be grateful that we had a roof over our head when somebody wasn't putting their hands on us, is basically like what we're told. So of course, in that situation, I'm going to run. I ran. I was not trying to be there. I told my caseworker what was going on. My caseworker was like, no, she doesn't. And I'm like, no, this lady is crazy. You're not listening to me. So I ran because no one was listening to me. And of course, like, I was hungry too. So I shoplifted at King Soopers, got in trouble, got arrested, ended up going back to the home, and then like in and out of like 23 different placements. And out of those 23 different placements in the 5 years, I ran a lot. And every time that I ran was because I wanted to go home. And that's crazy. It was crazy to them because like, why did I leave these? Like, you removed me from these people that abused me and who are like extreme alcoholics, but yet I want to go back. And of course, I was confused too, because people are telling me that my parents are sick. And I'm like, oh, but I love them. And I feel like that wasn't paid attention to, because not once when CPS came into my life, no one never asked Dominique what Dominique felt she needed, what Dominique wanted, what did Dominique want them to do. It was always like, I have the child's best interest, so I think this and I think that. It was always what they think and not when I think. So of course, like, just made me run. Like, I wanted to run back, and like, it wasn't necessarily because my dad was the abusive one. So it wasn't necessarily my dad that I was running back to. It was running back to my mom. The person that would wake me up in the middle of the night if I was sick and give me cough medicine, do my hair so pretty, buy me new outfits for the first day of school. So, I was used to that lifestyle, like, I wasn't trying to sound like a bougie kid, but I was used to the lifestyle. My parents kept me in the latest. My parents did not shop at Walmart for my clothes. We went to Burlington. We went to the mall. That's where I got clothes and stuff. So when I go into foster care and I'm being treated like I'm an animal, or I had to share clothes with my foster sisters, like, what is this place? I don't want to be here. I'd rather be at home getting my ass whipped than to be in this system with people who don't even care about me. And that running became from, I wanted a sense of belonging, or like, I would get mad and run. Like, there was some foster homes who were abusive. I want people to understand that abuse in the foster home is real. Sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, all of that is real in the home. If parents can do it, please believe me, foster parents can do it too. So yeah, that was just me running. And every time I ran, I felt like that at that time, they thought that it was because, when I ran, of course, they make you take a UA. My UA came back positive for THC. So they would assume that I was running to get high. And then the sense was, I wasn't running to get high. I was running because I wasn't feeling loved. I wasn't feeling, like none of that. I was feeling that at home, regardless of what addicts my parents were or how abusive my dad was. That was my love. That was my safety net that I've known for the past 16 years, and it was ripped from me. And, so foster care was more traumatic than my home life. I don't know.
Appreciate that, Domo. I think, when I want to give other folks a chance to kind of tee up themselves as well and those experiences, but I would love to come back to given the reality of that removal and that lack of belonging and that lack of love that you felt in those placements, would love for you to start thinking, as we're hearing from Nate and Tamisha, around like, what could that have looked like? We've heard already from Morgan earlier as a foster parent, the lack of training, the lack of understanding, maybe those cultural competencies around where kids are coming from. I appreciate what you said. You're like, I'd rather be at home getting whooped in a place that I felt known and loved. And so I really appreciate you highlighting that for us. But I'm gonna turn over to Nate. Would love to hear a little bit more about, again, that experience of when you, sounds like you said 23 or 29 years, you gave your age away. I didn't know. I thought you were a little younger. So, but those 23 years when you're in the system, tell us some more about that experience and that sense of belonging.
Well, first I wanted to start by saying I appreciate everything Dominique said. I could really relate to I feel the same way about almost everything that she said. And I think probably a reason that we both feel that way is because we both experienced a lot of placements just in the time that I was a youth in the child welfare system that was removed from a parent, and the time that I was a juvenile, like just the foster homes. I was in a lot of foster homes too. And and abuse is real and neglect is real. And I really understand it's challenging for a kid to understand at the time, because all these people are telling you that like your parents are this one type of person or this type of person that can't take care of you. But it's like, I mean, there may have been drugs and it may have been an unsafe environment at the end of the day at home, but I never felt like I wasn't loved, and I never felt neglected. That's where I wanted to be. And so all 26 of my foster homes and my time in foster care, 25 of those was during the time when it was my parents and I was just a kid in the system. And when I turned 12, my parents' rights were terminated. My dad voluntarily signed his rights away, and my mom's rights were terminated. And I know now that the caseworker, I have a relationship with the caseworker I had at that time, but I know now that at that time she was a caseworker that helped 18-year-old, 17-year-old, 19-year-old kids get their way out of the system. And when she got my file, they were like, here's an 11-year-old kid. He doesn't want to be adopted. You need to figure it out. And because I never wanted to be adopted, I always wanted to go home. So from the second my mom's rights were terminated, I ran from everywhere. I ran from every placement I was in. I ran from foster homes. I ran from residential treatment centers. I ran from residential placements. And I always was running back trying to find my mom. I didn't always make it, but my mom had the same phone number for multiple decades, and I was always able to find her. And it is kind of an unfortunate situation because I've listened to everything that everybody said, and I really understand and agree with basically all the perspectives that I've heard today. And I think it's just challenging because when you are that youth, I don't know, I just feel like so fast forward a little bit, the last residential treatment center I was in, it was actually at Southern Peaks. And when I left Southern Peaks, I thought I had finally found a caseworker who didn't lie to me. I remember all I used to ask for is like, I want one letter a year to my mom. If you give me one letter a year, I'll stop getting restrained. I'll stop running away. I'll do my treatment program. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And that caseworker, from the time I was like 11 to like 13, 14 years old, I went from like this little boy to like a full-blown teenager, and I was still saying the same thing. So she fought with me on my side, and my biological mother, whose rights are terminated, ended up being able to get custody of me because of her belief in what I wanted for myself, and also my blurred belief that my mom wasn't the person that everyone said she was. And unfortunately, it was the exact situation that everybody said it was. And at the time, I wasn't really able to comprehend, and I just became a part of it. So I started using narcotics and selling drugs when I was 14, 15 years old. And I was doing it with my mom. And that manifested when I was 18. I went to federal prison for selling an undercover ATF agent, guns and explosives. And I was 18. I mean, it's still crazy when I talk about it, because most of my peers at that time, people that were supposed to be my peers, are like in high school getting ready to go to college. But the people that were actually my peers were like 30, 40-year-old dudes. And like my co-defendant was like 52 years old when we got indicted together. So when I was 18, and when I got out, I fell right back into it, and everything really changed for me when I had my kids. When I got out of prison, I met the woman who's my wife today, and within 3 years, I went from no responsibilities, living recklessly, and to being married and having three of my own kids. And in that process, my kids were taken. I went to a termination hearing and a 3-day contested hearing where they tried to terminate my kids. 2 out of 3 of my kids, I held the baby during the termination hearing, and I won that termination hearing, and we got our kids back. And a couple years ago, I started with ORPC, helping parents get their kids back. But I definitely feel like I did take some of the things that I felt like were important. Was I really like, I can't remember which placement it was, but I thought that was a really unique idea to have individualized, like staffed with individualized with individual kids, because I feel like there is no like, and I thought this when I was a kid going through placement. I was able to see like this program, a lot of programs are designed to help, but there is, when you're talking about a demographic of trauma youth from a million different cultures and backgrounds and ethnics and classes, there's never going to be a one umbrella fits all. This is going to be the program that changes all kids' lives.
Nate, let me jump in real quick because I really appreciate everything you're saying right now. And I don't want you to give away all of your fantastic aspirational looking ahead yet. So I'm gonna pause you on that because I want to give Tamisha a chance to come in, but I want to come back to that later because that's a huge one. Is like, all right, like what have you heard today? And also what's in your brain around like what could and should have been different for you, right? As we look at kids now. So, but I want to pause you there if that's okay. And Tamisha, would love for you to jump in and tell us more about your experience, just so that we know kind of where everyone's coming from here.
Yeah. Wow. Just thank you all for sharing. I connected with a lot of what was already said. For me, I entered the child welfare system around age 6 years old. My mom and my both parents struggled with substance use. So I went into foster care. That was a really traumatic experience for me because I didn't know what was going on. I was scared. I was alone. But I feel like it was for my own protection because the situation with my parents was not good. Like my mom was like on the streets. We experienced homelessness. She was using crack cocaine. So I was exposed to a lot of just negative things and saw a lot of things at a really young age, and was not being cared for properly. And then my dad had custody of me because my mom couldn't take care of me. But my dad also was not able to fully take care of me. And so there was this family that lived across the street that I spent a lot of time with, and they pretty much took me in and made sure I was good and my needs were met. But I guess they had got into it with my dad, and I remember like just coming home from school one day, and I was locked out of my house because I literally walked home from school at 6 years old, and so I had like sat on my porch all day, and then they ended up coming out and they let me come back over. But then that's when they made the report. There was also some physical abuse with my dad as well. So I stayed in that placement. Then I ended up going in with kinship with my grandparents. I stayed with them until like around age 13, and then went back with my dad. And that's really when like I started to get in trouble and act out. Also during that time frame, my mom suffered a traumatic brain injury when I was 9 years old. And so I didn't have my mom. She really wasn't in my life anymore. And she was a vegetable for a couple of years. She had to like learn everything over and get her memory back. And so she was in like memory care and like rehabilitation facilities. And so that was very traumatic for me. And went back with my dad, 13. He thought that he could just leave me unattended. And so during that time, I started getting in trouble. Like my first charge was like a shoplifting charge. And so that ended me up in the system. I also had truancy issues. So I wasn't going to school. And like I said, like my dad, like, I don't know, there was just like this weird dynamic with my dad. And so like, I just was never at home and I was always staying with other people. Well, that led me into getting in trouble again with a group of youth. And so I was 14 years old. The police brought me home and my dad said, I'm losing the house. You need to find somewhere to live. So I called my grandma and I asked my grandma if I could stay with her. And then after that, I stayed with my grandma for a little bit. But that whole time I had like some juvenile justice involvement. And also child welfare was involved again when I was staying with my grandma in that kinship placement. And I ended up running away. And I just remember my dad's voice in my head. And he was always telling me, like, if you ever get pregnant, you're on your own. So when I was on the streets, I had ran into someone that was like older than me and basically like took me in. And then I ended up, he basically like, it was almost like a human trafficking situation, but instead of like sex trafficking, it was drug trafficking. And so taught me how to like sell drugs on the streets for money. And so at 14 years old, I ended up with a felony offense. Ended up doing some time, ended up going into a foster placement, another foster placement after that. And I was on probation. And I just really struggled with belonging anywhere. I always felt like I was a burden anywhere I stayed, even when I was like in a kinship placement and, you know, tried to stay with some of my family members. I went into several different foster homes, but I did a lot of the times end up running away. So I remember I used to go to George Washington High School, and they had put me in a foster placement all the way in Arvada. And I was just like a culture shock going from George Washington to Pomona High School. I just never really felt like I had connected like in my community or even in the placement that I was in. And that placement that I went to in Arvada, like I don't know, I feel like they just treated us like we were just like the maids of the house. Like it was really structured. We had to like clean. We couldn't use mops. Like we had to like clean the floors on our hands and knees and stuff like that. So I really just didn't like being in that setting. And I kind of just bounced around between like group homes, treatment facilities, and different placements my whole teenage years. Like I spent most of my birthdays locked up because of my running and because of the charge that I had. I was in and out and getting constant like probation violations, and it was always just for running. And then I remember at 17 years old, I was in like my final placement and I was doing really well. And oh, the other point that I wanted to make is like a lot of times when I ran, I would go visit my mom at the nursing home. And for me, like running in certain places that I was in, like what running away, like I didn't really see it as running away. It was just like, I didn't come home right away from school, you know? And then I knew I was gonna get in trouble and I had like all these people and I just like, I feel like a lot of it was kind of like that fear of like getting in trouble or just having like that confrontation of, oh, you did this, or, you know, you're gonna be in trouble and this and that, you know? So it was kind of like to avoid that. And I would just like be gone, you know? And so the last time I had ran through my placement, I was 17 years old. I was on ankle monitor. They gave me an ankle monitor to stay put. And I ended up cutting off my ankle monitor. And I think for me during that time, like I was just going through this place in my life where I was going to be 18. I didn't know where I was going to be in life. I didn't have any hope. I never really felt like I belonged or anyone cared for me. And I just didn't know what my future was going to look like. And so in my eyes, I thought that I could just like leave and be gone until I turned 18. And then when I turned 18, everything would go away. But then I had realized, when I was on the run, I was like, well, I have this felony charge, and if I don't take care of it as a juvenile, like it could follow me into my adult years. And so I didn't want that because, I didn't want that to hold me back. And so I ended up turning myself in to like the courts of probation. And I remember my sentencing hearing, there was a debate about what they were going to do with me. And part of what they wanted to do, because I had been in the system for so long, is they just wanted to give me 60 days and just close out my case.
And hey, Tamisha, so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time. I think you're brushing your microphone with your hand, maybe.
Oh, sorry.
And it's cutting over your voice, and I just want to make sure we're hearing what you're saying. So at your
Yeah.
hearing, they were debating. Go ahead.
Yeah, they wanted to close out my case. And so they were debating about just giving me 60 days and then being done, or committing me to, it was DYC then, now it's DYS, but I needed treatment. I needed mental health services. I really struggled with like severe trauma and depression. And the whole entire time I was in the system, I never got to deal with that. I never got to heal from the physical and the sexual abuse that happened when I was a child that I had never talked about. And sorry, I get really emotional. I haven't told my story in a really long time. And I just remember the judge, and I just feel like me getting committed was like the best decision for me, because I went into treatment and I was finally able to like heal and deal with like my mental health. And I heard a lot of you all talking about, just how like what the youth need, and we need support, community, and belonging. I kept hearing that. And I was able to have a year and a half to work on my trauma and address that. And I had got to a point where I was tired of running, and so I decided to use that time to like focus on my healing and myself, so that I can be like the best adult for myself, because I knew that there was no one for me on the other side. When I had left the system, I always felt, and even when I was in it, I just always felt alone, and that's how these kids feel. Like they just don't have nobody that cares. So, and again, I apologize. I was not expecting.
You're not allowed. I'll say the one thing you're not allowed to do is apologize. Don't apologize, Tamisha. Really,
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's heavy. I haven't really thought about it in a long time. But yeah, I aged out. I was at Jefferson Hill. I was like at every youth facility you can imagine. Like I stayed at the Gilliam, but I ended up going into Montview, then I went to the Foot, then I went into Jefferson Hills. And did a lot of great work at Jefferson Hills. That was a really hard facility to be in. There were times that I wanted to run, but I just kept trying to focus on like just myself, and we were able to do some really cool things there that kind of helped me stay there. So we started a running club, and I ran my first 5K on my 18th birthday. I worked my way up to the highest level in that program. And so I was able to do stuff like that, like do 5Ks and stuff.
I thought you meant like a running club to run away. And I was like,
no. The opposite, right? No, but it was like the opposite. So it was like, instead of, it was something positive.
It's incredible.
So, to like run for a cause, right?
Yeah.
And also running was like a huge coping skill in a way to just kind of just let go and heal and grow and be healthy, right? So I feel like I got trained. I would wake up at 4:00 in the morning to go on a run, and that was like amazing for me. And then I went to Third Way, and then I went to their group home, and then I went to Lincoln, and then I aged out on my own after that.
Tamisha, I really want to just hold a quick space for you and say thank you. for sharing that and trusting us to listen. And so just really appreciate that. And that's a lot. And so don't ever apologize for sharing your story. So thank you. I want to bring us back a little bit because I know folks are going to be eager to ask questions. And Jordan and Stephanie, I'm going to say, like, I think we're having a really great conversation. So we might have to push back into our agenda a little bit right here, because I think our agenda today is to listen. So I think we've got a lot more to listen to. A question I want to really ask, I'm hearing a couple of things, and so I'm just going to try and summarize a couple of things I'm pulling out, and cut me off and say that's not what I'm saying. But I'm hearing the sense of belonging piece, right? That's huge, that everyone is sharing, and that lack of sense of belonging. I'm also hearing that piece around each of you mentioned bio family and wanting to, when folks say, like, why is a kid running? You were like, someone said, like, they thought I was trying to run to get high. Well, yeah, I might've gotten high when I was running, but the reason I was running is because I wanted to get back to these folks that I felt like knew and cared for me. And Nate, it sounded like you had made some really specific requests around writing a letter once a year, if you can just let me do that sort of thing. So I'm hearing some, like, really specific asks of what you were hoping for, despite the reality that you couldn't be, your family's, maybe your family's parental rights were terminated. But even given that reality, what were opportunities to maintain that connection is one of the things I'm hearing. So I want to ask the question, what, if you're looking at your experience and the simple, it sounds like a simple question and it's not, what could, and I want to emphasize what could, because it was possible, what could and should have been different for you in those situations. So it sounds like, one of those things that should have been different, Domo, is, did anyone ask you? Did anyone ask with the question of, like, what did you need? That was one thing I've already heard, but I want to ask y'all, what could and should have been different for you? And so I'm going to start, Domo, I'm going to come back to you to make sure you have voice on that. So what could and should have been different, if we're getting specific?
Yeah, for me,
go ahead. Yep.
I felt like I should have gotten the opportunity to go into treatment sooner, instead of me entering the juvenile justice system in order to get that healing and that therapeutic intervention that I needed.
So it sounded like, Tamisha, you were saying that you knew that what you needed was to be addressing your trauma and those mental health supports, and that wasn't happening on a really practical level for you. Am I hearing that right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Tamisha. Domo, you want to jump in?
So what should or would have been different?
Yeah.
Like, as far as my running or my case in general?
As far as your placements and, as it relates to, like, the why behind you ran, right? Like, thinking about that, what could and should have been different that would have helped in those situations of you wanting to run?
Can we let Nate go and come back to me?
Yeah, of course. Nate.
I don't know, I feel like two things come to mind. One, really a sense of belonging is really, I mean, for me, the last placement that I was in there for like over 2 years. And by the time I left there, that was like that, even to this day, I still talk to a lot of those people because that was like my family. And eventually I felt like that's where I belonged. So I feel like leading up to there, the reason I ended up going to a place like that, I just feel like it really came down to just not having any belonging, and running away was the only, for when a kid runs away to go back home, it's kind of looked at like it's the kid doing something wrong. But regardless of how old you are, if you're taken from your parents, like it's hard you're not just taking kids away from their parents, but you're taking the parents away from their kids too, or the other way around. I don't know if that makes sense, but so that piece. And I forgot what the other thing I was going to say is, I don't know if Domo if she's ready yet, but I know that was a big one for me.
So Now that I have time to think, honestly, what could have been different was the ability to be a child. Once you go into foster care, I feel like it strips your ability to be a child, to go do childish things, like, you know, had to grow up real quick. And that could have been different by loving me, you know, just loving me, even from like a caseworker, the judges, somebody got to have some type of love and compassion. It's not just a job. You're really messing with somebody else's life. CPS was never meant to be a business, and now it is.
Appreciate that, Delmo. So really calling on that human element of like, you're interacting with systems all day long. And so even if you're talking about a caseworker or a judge, like, where is that compassion and that sense of being known, despite that reality of being in this system? Appreciate you naming that. Nate, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to what she said. I feel like you don't kids, when they're taken away from their parents, it's no longer about, and she's right, it's no longer about being a kid. You like, it's almost like instinctive and subconsciously, you don't even realize it no more, but doing kid things is no longer on the front of your mind. It's about surviving, what's going to happen next, how am I going to make it through today, is there anybody in this world that loves me? And like those are the things that goes through a kid's head when they're taken away. So I think it might have been Brandon earlier who said, or somebody earlier said, you know, when you're taken, when a child's taken, there's trauma, that there's already trauma that's happening just in the act of taking the kid away. And after a kid's taken away, regardless of whether it's a reason on the child's behavior or the parents' behavior, something they're doing, that no longer is the focus. It's never the focus. It's about a bunch of other things. And so that the trauma of getting separated from your family just kind of gets swept under the rug while we try to focus on all these other things that are coming to the forefront.
Appreciate you naming that, Nate. Thank you. I want to pause us there, and I see Chaz has their hand raised, and then would also encourage other folks, if you'd like to raise your virtual hand, but would really love for task force members to come forward and ask those questions. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Chaz Tedesco. I'm an Adams County Commissioner. I'm also part of the CPO, the Child Protection Ombudsman. It's a privilege to be here. I just want to say to the speakers, especially this panel, you guys are amazing. I'm a former foster child. I was given up at birth. Spent a lot of years in foster care, was eventually adopted, but I want to speak on what all three of you have said. And having been 10 years involved with the Human Services Department and in foster care and adoptions and whatnot, from a child's perspective is what you guys are talking about. I can't say how important it is for what you are saying. I call it the white knight syndrome. We in the business, and I want to call it a business because it has grown exponentially, but the numbers and the percentages have not changed in their outcomes. We're doing something wrong, and we're not listening to those people that are coming out of this system, going through this system, in this system. I ran away a lot. I didn't know that, you know, when I didn't know my biological family, didn't know where I was running to or what I was running for. I just ran. As kids, we're taught these are your parents. Nobody's ever going to take that away from you. They will always be your parents. They will always love you. I never knew whether my parents had alcohol problems, domestic violence, whatever it may be that caused or created the circumstance. But I was taken away and I was given up. But there was never an explanation. There was never a closure of why were you in that position? I'm 57 years old right now. I met my biological parent 5 years ago. I had a closed case, but because of DNA, closed cases no longer exist. I still don't have those answers. I needed something when I was a kid to explain to me what's happening to me. because I didn't know how to vent about what was taken away from me, because I didn't know what was going on. If we can't address that basic issue, all the other issues are just Band-Aids. We need to address basic issues. And I think that's what all three of these young people that have come forward are saying. I'm saying, and I'm old, I'm saying, and I appreciate this because it should not be a business. And I don't want to take away from our caseworkers or anybody on this board, because everyone here is putting their heart and soul into this. But until we can change the actual outcomes of foster care and address the basic needs for and the reasons behind foster care, I don't know that we can change those outcomes. And I really am appreciative of people, and yet young people like this that are stepping forward, bearing their souls and saying what they're saying, because it's time. I talk to foster parents, and foster parents say, look, I don't understand. My child is, you know, I give them everything they need. I give them brand new clothes. I give them toys, Xboxes. I give them everything they want. I take them to school. I don't make them ride the bus, whatever. Why can't they open up to me? Why can't they be? Because think about it from the child's perspective. If I'm going to be ripped away from another family, why would I bear myself to them? That's it. Basically, that's my perspective. Everyone has a different perspective. Thank you for the time.
Jazz, I really appreciate that, and appreciate you bringing in that perspective. And also you're just naming what we're all naming. It's just this level of appreciation for folks with this sharing and being willing to tell stories so that we can do this work. Want to ask for, I know we've got limited time, so task force members, this is a time to raise your hand and ask some questions, but would love to get into dialogue, the things that you're thinking about, but really things that you want to hear more about. So I'll give you all a minute to do that, and then I'll call in folks that I see. Beth, yes, please.
So I heard someone or all of you say that you felt really alone and abandoned. Is that right? And so my question, I guess we don't really know, but you know, in my situation where Timmy was voluntarily sent to residential treatment because of his behavior, do you think that would be a situation where he would have felt abandoned too? Like, even though he wanted to go, he said he doesn't want to stay home. He wants to go to residential, but I almost felt like when I dropped him off after everything happened that maybe I should have tried harder to keep him with me. Do you think that same sense of abandonment would be there in that situation for a younger kid?
So just speaking, because I have a couple of younger kids who do run, it's the sense of belonging for them too, you know, or maybe there was a trigger that happened in the home, because sometimes there could be a trigger in the home or in the placement to where the youth doesn't know how to confront it or who to tell about it. So instead they'll run because it's more safer for them to do that. I can see that. And of course, like as always, like the feeling of sense of abandonment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Demo. Renee.
Hi, thank you all, first of all, so much for sharing your personal stories. I think my question is primarily for Tamisha, but if others have things to add, also maybe relevant. But you mentioned especially treatment and the delay in getting treatment, which it sounds like you feel like was helpful for you to kind of stabilize emotionally and be able to move forward. And I have two questions. One is, looking back, do you think there are particular reasons that were solvable in terms of the delays, like particular barriers that you could mention? And two, it sounds like you got treatment, if I understood correctly, when you were in the DYS or then DYC system, which to me brings up the challenging issue of sometimes someone needs to be somewhere long enough to access treatment. And of course, we want to minimize locking kids up, whether it's in a juvenile justice system or outside of it. But I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that, kind of that, difficult balance of helping kids stay put when they might have a hard time so they can access treatment, versus, not having them in that sort of scenario.
Oh, that was a hard question. I don't know. I feel like there was a lot of components to that. Like, I'm not kind of having a hard time. Well, can you like really ask that? I mean, or yeah, can you? I don't know. I just feel like for me, like the things that I got to do, once I was able to get the support in the services.
Hey, Tamisha, could you come a little closer to your mic? Sorry, you're kind of muted. Want to make sure we hear you.
Yeah. For me, I feel like what would have been, or what was just the most helpful was just that consistency. And consistency with those that were involved, and not having like a lot of changes within the structure. Once I finally was settled, like I had like the same therapist and all of that. And so that really helped. I get just to have people that I really trusted and that were like on my team. And so that's what really helped in that sense.
Renee, any clarifying or want to jump in and push a little more on things you're thinking about?
Actually, thank you. Could you say what allowed that consistency? I want to make sure we're understanding you. And was it the place you were, or something outside of that allowed?
Yeah, it was the place that I was at. So not bouncing around and moving around. What
type of place was that? Was that one of the GYC facilities, or was it?
Yes, Jefferson Hills.
At Jefferson Hills, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what was different about that place that allowed stability that other places didn't?
I think just the structure, and also, I don't know, I feel like the support was different that I was receiving. I had more of a say in my treatment and what that plan was going to look like. And I feel like when youth end up in these places, they're always being told what they need to be doing. But when you give that youth, when you empower them and allow them to have more of a say, and it's like a partnership, when you give a youth the voice, and you're not just forcing them to take these medications or forcing them to, I think just the team approach and the way that the professionals were communicating with me. I know I was older at that time. And so I think it looks different when you're like a little bit younger, but yeah, I think just empowering to have a say in like what my needs were and what was really going to help be beneficial in that way.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tamisha. Got time for, I think, one more question, and then I want to do a quick wrap around to kind of wrap us up. I will say one thing. What is very clear, and Domo, you and I had talked about this. I think Nate, you and I talked about this as well. Also, Tamisha, where these kinds of conversations have to continuously happen over these next 2 years, right? Because it's not like hey, come and sit on our panel and tell us a few things, and then we'll see you in 2 years, right? So I want to name that. I know that we are short on time. But we will certainly find opportunities to continue this conversation, and are just super honored for you to take this time right now. Janelle, I've got you lined up for the next question.
I'm having technical difficulties. Tamisha, my question's for you, and thank you, Nate and Dominique, for your words that you guys said. But I was really interested by something Tamisha said, that all of your running, all of these things that were happening, and that you just didn't have that consistency. And then once it came, things started to go better, and you were thankful for that. Would you say that you felt that maybe once you kind of slowed down for a minute and also started to participate in your own healing, like you said, it was a partnership? Because from what I see so much kids are running away from that. And so we don't have the chance to give them what you experienced, right, towards the end. I mean, do you think that it also comes down to you, the youth at the time, stopping and kind of giving in and leaning in with that trust that things maybe came out in the end? So it's not so much, because I'm hearing a lot of what the system is doing wrong, you know what I mean? But you took a lot of accountability. And so like you were really loud to me. And you're like, I was doing this, this, and this. And then I stopped and I leaned in and it worked.
Yeah.
Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I think that's important. You got to do the work. You got to be ready, and you can't force someone to do something they don't want to do. And so when it comes to the youth, I really think that that's important, and that's the most helpful.
Okay.
And
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, I have to run like I do. Like this kind of went way over my time.
You're good, Tamisha. I know we went over your time. I was just about to say we got to wrap this up. So Tamisha, thank you. I know you're probably at work, so we will continue the conversation with you, and are so honored that you shared your story. Domo and Nate, if you have one more minute to hang on, I'd appreciate that. But Tamisha, thank you.
Yes, feel free to share my contact information if anyone ever wants to reach out for resources. And check out Elevating Connections, because we definitely help support youth and create that community for youth. Find that sense of belonging. So
thanks, Tamisha. All right. Incredible. Well, Nate and Domo, just wanted to say thank you. You know, there's so much more to go deeper on. And as Stephanie said in the chat, we're going to continue the conversations. And that has been really clear as a value from both from Stephanie and her team, and also from this task force of how do we continue to weave in your voices in meaningful ways and go deeper as they get into this work. So I just wanted to say thank you. Wanted to give you the floor if you had a quick 15-30 seconds of kind of final words as this task force is looking ahead at their 2 years of work on this particular topic of reducing, you know, runaways in out-of-home placements. Anything to just kind of leave us with from your perspective?
I just want to say for being the first meeting, out of everything I heard a lot of great perspectives, and I think it's really motivating and comforting to me to know that there's this many people with the same heart and goals in mind to positively impact the kids that are in the systems today. So I just want to say I appreciate all of you guys.
Thanks, Nate. We appreciate you. Domo, you've got a very cute cat on your hands over there, but if you can come off mute,
Thank
we'd
you.
love to hear from you.
He keeps crawling on my table, and I don't like that. So one thing to leave you guys with is I feel like that just with my personal experience as a former youth and connecting with current youth today is consistency, loving. And even though, like, you know, because a lot of youth mess up and they're like, well, nobody's gonna want me now, you know, to always that reminder of saying like, hey, you know, you messed up. Yeah, you did, but that doesn't mean I cared for you less. You know, that reassurance of, you know, because like, I don't know, just from my experience, just running, and, you know, when you run from a foster home, the foster parents like, oh my God, I don't want them no more, you know, and then that's it. And then it's like, it's just that easy to give up. So just let's start treating foster youth as if they were our own children that came from us, you know, because I can't, like, my kids act up in school right now. If my daughter was to run away, I'll tell her, go, like, good luck out there, you know, and then she'll look at me like I'm crazy. But, you know, I would never be like, well, you can't come back home, or I don't want you no more. I can't do that. That's my child. You know, so we need to treat foster youth the same way, and maybe we can cause less running in. Keeping connections with family. You have to keep connections with family, keeping connections with their siblings. Somebody from their past life has to stay in contact because it gives them the sense of stability.
Thank you, Dominique. I appreciate you calling us in on that, right? And those perspectives to keep and center as folks continue. So again, Domo, Nate, thank you. We'll follow up with you both. But really appreciate you just coming in and being as honest and candid as you were. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody, we are, that was an incredible conversation. Really appreciate folks. I know we've got a lot more to talk about with them, but I want to give us a quick 3 minutes. So I'm coming back at 10:47 because I know it's about to be the 44. We're going to hear a quick thing from our folks, partners at the DU Lab, and then we'll have a quick opportunity for public comment, and then we'll close out and want to honor your time. So just going to give you 3 minutes because I know we might need to do a little bit of self-care after just receiving so much on that panel. And we'll see you back at the 47. Thanks. All right, home stretch. Somebody, I'm going to remove this spotlight off of me. There we go. Stephanie, please jump in and take us to one of our final pieces.
Great. So yes, I wanted to take a moment. We already mentioned in the chat and a little bit earlier about how do we continue to infuse these conversations with youth voice, with family voice, with provider voice. And one of the ways that will be done in this task force is really through our very own legislation, which will provide and has provided the funding for research. I want to introduce you to Kristen Klopfenstein and Kristen Myers, who are representing the Colorado Evaluation and Action Lab. And if I could call them to the screen and just give us a few moments about the type of work you're going to be engaged in and the time frame for that work, that would be great.
Great, thank you all so much. Kristen Klopfenstein was not able to join us today, so I'm going to represent the two of us, the two Kristens, the Kristen squared, if you will. It's great to see some of the faces on here. I recognize a lot of you from my former work at the Colorado Department of Ed. where I worked in foster care education. So obviously I'm really passionate about this, this topic, and excited to continue on with this work. So I am partnering with the Action Lab to conduct some focus groups. And as Stephanie mentioned, that's something that is a part of the legislation to include youth voice. And we want to do that very intentionally, respectfully and systemically, to make sure that we are truly capturing their lived experience and truly representing what they hope to see in this actionable change, and to provide that information to the task force moving forward, so that today, I mean, as you could see in our just our few minutes that we had with the folks that gave their time and provided their stories of lived experience, it's so powerful. And so that's something that I honor and I take very seriously. A little bit about my background as a researcher. I'm currently an assistant professor at the University of Northern Colorado, and my research agenda has really involved young people in foster care, but more specifically, young people who have experienced trauma. And that's something that we heard loud and clear today, is that trauma is a central piece in really gaining understanding, and how can systems and people work better on behalf of folks to be able to change these systems and inform this very essential task force in doing that. So my goal as a researcher is to gain that youth voice through those focus groups. A little bit about our process, where we're at right now. I'm working with our university's internal review board to go through kind of the red tape on our end to make sure that we are going about this the right way, and making sure that we are honoring youth and protecting their experiences as well. So I am working with that currently. And also really in here, my role within this group is, and Kristen's role too, is to listen. And that is something that I was furiously taking notes throughout all of the presentations today, because this is all informing this data and this part that we're getting from youth. So my research is really going to be qualitative in nature, and there's a lot of quantitative things that we look at numbers all day long. We have easy access to numbers, but what we don't have easy access to is youth voice. So a little bit of my research that I've already conducted to see what's already out there in terms of this topic. The youth who shared today, the young people and adults who shared today about their lived experiences, is really consistent with what we're seeing in the literature. So there's not a ton out there. There's only one other study that included youth voice, and that was conducted in 2004, and it was data from a long time before that, so it's quite dated at this point. So I'm very appreciative of as a researcher to have this opportunity. Just want to let the task force know that I take it very seriously, and that I'm happy to answer any questions about my process and the lab's involvement moving forward. But that's just my general quick overview of what we hope to accomplish.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. And are there any quick questions for Kristen and her role as it relates to this task force? Okay, I don't see any hands at this point, but yes, Kristen, we will certainly be in touch and look forward to your ongoing work as well. And so, yes, friends, I think we are coming to a close here. I am going to turn it over to Trace to finish with our housekeeping, and then we will say goodbye to all of you till the next time.
Perfect. First, thanks, Stephanie, and thanks, Kristen. Real quick, so as a public meeting, want to give the opportunity for public comment if there is anyone. I haven't seen any notes, so I apologize if I missed something, but do want to give an opportunity for that if there is anyone on the call. Okay, I'm not seeing any public comment. Thank you. So a couple of quick things. You should have received an email from me that has the overview document, and that in that overview, it contains all of the dates. Those are already listed. Really appreciative, Stephanie, of your team of just naming what those dates are so that we know. After this meeting, I'm going to be sending out individual invites for each of you that will have the link for that. These will remain virtual, though we're certainly open. I think, Stephanie, you tell me, but certainly open if there are opportunities for folks. I know that we've got folks from all over the state, but if there's an opportunity ever for us to gather on a patio somewhere, I would welcome that in certain ways. But for these meetings, they'll remain virtual, and you'll get an invite for all of those. Other than that, Stephanie, Jordan, is there anything I'm missing that we wanted to make sure that we reminded folks of?
If I can just do a quick plug, we still have 4 vacancies on the task force that I would love some help from our task force members or any of our panelists today filling. The vacancies are, we are still looking for 1 additional foster parent, 1 additional kinship provider, a representative of a statewide association that represents child placement agencies, and a young adult under 22 who has experienced residential care placement. So really just kind of putting out a call for some help on getting those applications filled. Anyone interested, please reach out to me directly. My information is in that overview document, and we'll get those seats filled.
Perfect.
Yeah. The only other thing I just wanted to say, so why don't we send you a list of those seats? It was a lot to remember. So we'll go ahead and send you an email with that so you actually have it. And I hope you can forward that to your networks. And then secondly, I just wanted to let you know that our agency is in the process of building out a web page for this task force. And so in the not too distant future, you will be able to access agendas, meeting minutes, and this video as well, so that you can share that again with colleagues. You can review things if perhaps you want to take another look at something. So just wanted to let you know that all of the great work that's been done here today is memorialized and will be available for your use. And when that occurs, when we get that up and live, you will be getting a link to that as well. Otherwise, I think that that brings us to the end. I want to thank you. It's been, a full 3 hours, and I know we didn't give anyone really any breaks, but I think we'd all agree.
That's my fault.
No, it's not a criticism. I don't think, being engaged with these members of the community is just a tremendous opportunity that we don't typically get in our everyday experience in this way. So just thank you, Trace. Thank you, Christine, for your assistance today with this meeting. Thank you all for spending your time with us, and we will look forward to being in touch in the future. Have a great day.
Perfect. We'll see everybody November 2nd. Thanks so much.
Everyone.
Bye.